Revolution Radio. Studio B. Are you ready? I'll dig spirits and stories both current and from days gone by. It's the Spectre Detective. With Christine Hart.
Hi, welcome to Revolution Radio, and I hope I'm coming in live from London. Today I hope I'm really clear and everyone can hear me. It's Spectre Christine Hart, the Spectre Detective, and welcome to the show. This week we're going to be discussing the truth movement and what it means, why it's recently been joined by Robbie Williams, and what's going on. And for that, I've brought on my guest now, who's been a guest for many weeks, and she is a blogger on the truth movement, and a lot of you will have heard of her, Jana. I'm going to bring Jana on, and hopefully going to bring her on. There we are. Hope she is gearing up to be with us. The time's gone quickly tonight. It's absolutely gone really, really fast. So welcome to Spectre Detectives, coming in live from London, and it's a rainy night in London tonight. It's grey, it's white, it's 9 o'clock at night over here, and I know in America it's early in the morning, and it's bright white out there, but it's raining. And so I hope the show tonight will be a good one. We're going to be talking about the truth movement, why it's recently been joined by Robbie Williams, what's going on, what is the truth movement, what does it actually mean? And I've got my guest, Jana Greasley. I know all of you know her as Jana, and she's a blogger on the truth community, and she's been my guest for a few weeks now. Jana, are you there with me? Oh, she's not there with me. Okay. Okay, let me try and reach her again, or I'm going to be flying solo tonight. So let's try and reach her. Okay, I'll try again. So let me try again to reach her on Skype. So trying again. And it's such a shame because I do record the show because Revolution Radio, since Hawk passed away from cancer, we don't have archives. So it's all a bit... oh, there you are, Jana. Thank you for joining the show.
Evening all.
Welcome. I was just saying that we're going to do a show tonight talking about the truth community, and it's just been joined by Robbie Williams, as we saw. He was interviewed by one of the truth community people, Anna. Did you manage to see the interview, John, and what did you think of it?
No, I didn't watch it. I just saw an excerpt of it, but I've just been watching Andrew Guy's opinions about it. She said he talked nonsense or something. Did you watch it? What did you think?
It was okay. I heard a bit of it. I did get a bit bored because it was a bit, one of those, just one of those things where and ahed for a long time, and I lose my patience over that a lot, really. I sort of want people to get down to the meat of things straight away, and it was a bit and ahhing and a bit talking and a bit, yeah, I'm fed up with the way things are. And I thought that went on for a long time. And I thought, what about what's going on? Why are you speaking? What do you think? What's the bottom line? Rather than, a lot of sort of bus stop talk about, oh, it's not that good at the moment, is it, life? That a bit. Because everybody knows that right now. So, what new information? I felt anyway. I didn't, so I had to turn off. But I did see Anne's stuff.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite funny, actually.
She wasn't impressed. So we didn't talk about child abuse then.
Did they? I don't know because I did, as I say, I give it the 10
Right.
minutes, quarter of an hour, and they probably did. This it kind of seems like the new buzzword. I mean, as somebody that's been through quite horrific child abuse and written a book about it, and didn't really encounter many other people that have been through it. It seems to be a lot of people out there now banging the drum about it, and I don't know, it seems a bit weird, really. I don't feel like I'm going for it. People that I do understand people that have been through childhood abuse wanting to bang the drum about it, of course. But when you get people that sort of haven't been, haven't been through it, banging the drum about it, and then saying, "Oh, fund me to investigate it." I mean, like I'm an investigator, but how can you investigate it? I mean, it's not really done. I mean, how are they going to go about that? I don't really understand.
Well, this is Andrew Guy's criticism of John Wedger, isn't it? And I must say, I'm tending to agree with her because I watched some John Wedger. I had a bit of a John Wedger sesh last Friday night, and it does seem like narcissistic. I noticed like he was stood outside, was it the Royal Courts of Justice or something, or Westminster, and he had this T-shirt on, "I stand with John Wedger," and his
Right.
photo, and I thought that's really being up your own ass. That the
But what
hell
does it
is
all?
that?
What does it all mean? They're saying that everyone in the establishment is a child abuser. I don't really understand the whole.
Well, he he's Andrew Guy's point is he doesn't actually name any names.
But who's he blowing the whistle on?
All kinds of people,
Oh,
from
like,
politicians to bin men to whoever.
but what's he?
Um,
I don't understand what's he saying. Like, lots of MPs are child abusers, or all of
yeah,
them, or some of them.
there's a lot of historical cases, and there's some very sort of prominent historical cases. He does, I mean, he doesn't bring any new information, I think is the point that Andrew Gines saying. Like he mentioned politicians that other people have mentioned, so he's not breaking any sort of new ground for his "I stand with John Wedger" type thing. But he's interviewing all these women, and I did see an interview he did with a young man, but he's interviewing a lot of women at the moment, so I assume he's getting information from them about who the perpetrators are. But I don't know, the fact that he's associated with Bill Maloney. I mean, I think Brian Harvey's done a good job of exposing Bill Maloney because I watched some of the Brian Harvey stuff about him when in Andrew Ash, and his accent was changing and everything. Right off the, it was weird. One minute he's faking like this really strong Cockney accent. I'm talking about Bill Maloney now.
Oh.
And next thing he's talking in an ordinary voice, and I'm thinking, hang on, mate, you're an actor. I just get the feeling some of these people are actors. They're acting out a part. I really do.
I don't understand what all this seems like a distraction as well. I think David Icke started it a little bit
Yeah.
about all child abusers everywhere. I'm not sure that I believe that they're everywhere. I remember growing up that, I couldn't find other people that had been through it until I went into care. And there were some of the boys in there had been abused by male social workers and raped by them. And they were suicidal. But it wasn't like I didn't feel surrounded by loads of people. Even now, it's hard to meet, even though I've been to some groups where other people have been through it. I don't believe that there are child sexual abusers around every corner. And I don't believe that they're all in positions of power. It seems weird. But I know obviously some of the MPs, they're like public school boys, and a lot of them have, been through that fagging thing, and then they think that they're gay, and then they sort of get hold of rent boys, and I can see there must be a lot of that going on, and a lot of abusing young boys.
Yeah. Well, there's a culture about that in public schools, isn't there? There was a play written in the country. I went to see it in London. I didn't have a clue at the time. I had this upper middle class boyfriend who explained it all to me.
But isn't it about, didn't David Icke and also Miles Johnson start saying all this because it supposedly people that are abusing children are reptilian? And isn't that how it all came about? And now you get these other people, they sort of come in and they sort of grab the child abuse part. They leave out the reptilian part because they know that won't be accepted. And they kind of take it and run with it. And then they have this little badge flashing, alternative media. We're going to tell the truth. And the mainstream media isn't telling the truth. But I just think it's a bit of, I was excited about it at first because I met Miles and, he said, oh, let's do this and, let's do that. And he had his bases and I thought, oh, isn't that great? And, met Max Spears and the other people involved and, oh, isn't this exciting? It's alternative media. And then you quickly realize that it's
a shit show.
It is, because it's got just as many holes as mainstream media. Mainstream media, okay, you've got the people that own it, and they've sometimes got an agenda. Sometimes they're just rich people. They don't give a damn. I'm not sure Murdoch has got. I suppose he must have some political agenda, and I guess he has. And I don't know, is he Jewish or non-Jewish? I'm not sure about what he is, but it goes down in layers, and then you've got the editors, then you've got the news editors, and they're often really kind of spiteful people. And a lot of time their agenda is just to hurt. It's just a vent or something. It's about power. And so mainstream media is ugly for sure, because you've got so many sadists involved in it. I don't know how they got sucked into it, but it's a really sadistic place where they're actually even sadistic to each other. And that's how the phone hacking started, because there's no loyalty, there's no decency, there's a lot of egocentricity. With that phone hacking was obviously going to get caught, but they thought they'd never get caught for it. So that was stupid. And there's a lot of, and they're on a high wage. And then you've got alternative media who, for some reason, have taken up this drum of child abuse. But it started, I think, with David and Miles and Kerry Cassidy, but it had this edge to it, didn't it, that these people abusing children, they're doing so, and this is why I went for it, because I thought, well, having a sexually abusive adoptive father and then studying people like Brady, and Anne criticized me for going to visit Brady, but if you're sexually abused, it leaves you so abnormal and so screwed up in so many ways. I was trying to unscrew myself up. So I went, to study men like that, and then Bianchi to try and get a part of myself back, like we discussed last week, try and get a part of myself back, because it does screw you up. And I think men that sexually abuse children, there's not loads of them running around the street. I think often they've been abused themselves, and often they're very immature. They're always immature, aren't they? They're always, and I think they're probably possessed by something, some kind of entity. So I was quite excited to come across someone like Miles and David Icke, who said, well, they're non-human, because I think someone like Brady is non-human. And my father, it was nice to find that excuse for him so I could forgive. But now you've got these newer people coming up who are like saying they're just grabbing the sexual abuse part. They're leaving out that other hidden side because they know it's popular. And I don't really believe them. What do they actually really stand for? I mean, do they really give a shit about people that have been sexually abused? I think people that haven't been sexually abused themselves can't really grasp the seriousness of it in a way that they can't really grasp what it does to children. So I don't believe that they're going to spend their lives banging the drum about it. I don't go for it, actually. Really. Do you?
I don't. Well, it's a bit strange for me because I've supported people who've been through some dreadful experiences, and that's putting it lightly. So I have got some knowledge through that on a personal level. However, just looking at like the truth movement versus the mainstream media, of course, like the mainstream media and the police and the authorities have strict criteria, don't they, about how they assess a claim or a complaint or somebody brings an offence to them or whatever. Whereas like the truth movement, it's a free-for-all. I mean, you could say anything you like, but that's kind of the point of it, is that people can say, come on and say this X, Y, and Z happened. But I've noticed it. Yeah,
exactly.
but
That's why I don't believe I don't want to be mean again about JamesCasbolt, but him saying like he was adopted age 4 and then he was sexually abused by his adoptive father. I know it's quite rare that happens, and it's like weird that he's matched my age of adoption and then abused by, and he doesn't really fit the criteria of a. I don't know. I can tell what they're like. Someone like that, he doesn't really fit the criteria, does he? I don't think so, anyway.
I think he's somebody who's been majorly messed with in some form. I really do.
Sexually. I guess he did have that group that he called, well, he was very sexually abusive to women. He had that group called the Moo Pack.
Moo Pack, yeah, he had a very misogynistic attitude to women, but then he seems to have this very strange hold over women and this very strange magnetism for women.
But he was quite good looking, though, when he was younger, don't you think?
Yeah, but it's more than that. There's something else going on.
Do you think it was the super soldier thing?
Partly that, but there's another layer on top of that I don't know. Because I was researching maths and everything. Of course, I kept coming up against with James, and there's so many women that have made like YouTube videos about him, about JamesCasbolt, and he just like has this, like he said, he calls it a moo pack. So really, women are being rather stupid, aren't they? They can't sort of do that, and then the next thing they're saying, "Oh, these horrible men are being abusive." In my personal opinion, I think they need to sort of look at him and think, "Well, off you go, bud."
Oh, well, you can tell, I know, because a lot of people had to go at me doing posts on my Facebook. I was just researching what he'd said, because his story was the same as mine. And I wasn't researching it. I was like, finding bits that he'd said that shocked me. And whenever I post them, I'd get attacked by women. Oh, why are you posting about him? Do you think he's like a little puppy? And do you think he's so nice? But I hadn't even said that. And then a girl in the Truth Movement, a radio host, messaged me privately. She messaged me privately, and she said, "Oh, you shouldn't go out with him when he comes out of prison." I'm like, "What?" And I said, "I'm older than him. You know that." She goes, "Oh, don't worry, he'll have you." And then she went on and she was saying gonna treat you like shit and all this stuff. It's quite funny, really. It probably goes under the heading, if you're single, you must be desperate. I don't know, but it was
Oh,
funny. Weird.
God.
Women are
Yeah,
funny
well,
about him. Seemingly that girl, her friend had gone out with him or something, and he had treated her really, really badly. So that's what concerned this woman. And I said, just because you post about someone doesn't mean you like them
mm,
in that way, you know?
you
But
want to
some
have
people
a mad
think,
affair.
pardon,
You want
what?
doesn't mean that you might want to have a mad affair with them.
I know, it's funny, but people are like that around him, I think. And I said to her, you must think he's absolutely like gorgeous or something, you know? But
Mm.
maybe, perhaps it's that fame thing, you know, that sort of because Miles had him on the thing so much and made him sort of more or less famous in a way.
He
Um,
did.
the same with
He did.
Max, I suppose, that he had that girls chasing him, I think.
Well,
Maybe
Matt.
not as much, I don't think.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I think he could give him a run for his money.
Really.
Yeah. I think he sort of. Well, sort of. James was removed from the position, and Max filled it. There's just as many women making bloody YouTube videos about Max.
Is there?
So
I haven't seen any of these.
yeah, well, I did my research, didn't I? So
What are they
yeah.
saying? What kind of things do they say?
Oh, God knows. Probably, quite well. When before he died, when he was doing a lot of things for Miles, when he was doing the basis conferences and speaking, doing the public speaking bit, there seemed to be a lot of women. It was like JamesCasbolt all over again. There seemed to be a lot of women interviewing him, making videos of him, and posting them on YouTube. And you could tell it was like worship. And I thought, "Oh, what is this? What the hell's going on? What is this all about?"
Hmm.
And yeah, I remember, right, I watched one of this is ages ago, I haven't watched it for a while, but it was one of the talks that he gave at the basis conferences down in Devizes or wherever. And there was a woman in the audience, and she had I know this isn't me personally judging another woman or slagging her off, but she had that thing going on that I've noticed with a lot of women who go to these conferences. She had the monarch thing going on, as I call it, because she had the leopard skin jacket on. It was, look at me, I must be a monarch. So I'm wearing leopard skin and butterfly things because I know that means I'm a monarch. And she kept asking him loads of questions. And it was obvious she just wanted to have a connection with him and keep the attention from him on her. So, like, there was this weird thing going on again. Um, but I mean, he's a handsome young man and articulate. And I think did he have acting classes? I know there's acting in his family.
I'm not sure actually. I was talking to Sarah about him and we had that little session. I think I told you about it.
He did. Yeah.
Yeah, she was saying she still communicates with him. Um, you
Yeah.
know.
I'd be surprised if she didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Um,
So it's a
yeah.
strange affair, isn't it, Ollie?
Yeah, it is. I was, I shared with you about the, what she did that, I'm wondering whether to share it on air because some people, I know a lot of people have had disagreements with Sarah, and I had a huge argument with Sarah over Terry Joyce, you know, which I overreacted to Terry, which I feel ashamed about now, wanted to go and sort it out when Miles Johnson said, "Oh, you should come on a show and do a joint thing," and then he said he did that thing to me about not ringing. He said, "Don't ring in. Whatever you do, don't ring in." I'll ring you. And then he did that thing where he didn't ring me.
And then said, "Oh, she hasn't shown up."
I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it because my son was a bit of a fan of Terry. He'd looked at her little comedy sketches and thought she was good. And he was like, "Oh,
Mm.
mummy, you must talk to her. You must talk to her. That'd be great, you know." And I said, oh, I'm not really sure I want to, you know, because I made a fool of myself being cross over her saying, you know, I went off air when I was talking to Max. I felt cross because I felt she'd intimated that I'd, you know, done something to involving his death. And then, of course, Miles had done a show with Kerry Cassidy and said that I was linked to his death, uh,
Mm.
which is really bang out of order. And then
Mm.
yeah, and then he hit me another slap by doing that with Terry. And, you know, my son had the phone. He said, I'm going to make you do it. And he was looking at it and we were monitoring it because we went to paint this flat I was moving into. And he said, oh, any time now. And he was like mocking me and saying, don't think you're going to get out of it. And so he forced me. And yet no phone call came through. And we were both on the drive back. We were both, that's weird, isn't it? And he said, oh, maybe it's cancelled. And when I got home, I put my laptop on, and there, of course, was a show with him telling people, oh, if they knew my number to ring me. Now, he had
Oh,
my number. I mean,
right.
yeah, so I
Next
snapped at
Tuesday.
her. Pardon?
See you next Tuesday.
Exactly. And then that all blew up even bloody worse. And then I was talking to Sarah and she said something about Terry and well then did she say something about Max? I can't remember. Anyway, was it? And then I said something rude to her. She said something rude back, and then that escalated in a horrible little bitch fest in Messenger. And then I blew up. I think I did an angry Facebook post, which I shouldn't have done. And so I didn't speak to her for like a long time. And then recently we started speaking again, and she asked me, did I want to do some healing with her? So I said yes. And it was quite interesting because, as I was telling you, she basically told me to shut my eyes and then go to a forest, which is similar to something you've done with me before.
Mm.
And she said to picture a door and then to go upwards through the door, which is shamanic journeying, isn't it? Obviously. So I
Yeah.
went through and then she said go higher and higher and higher through the chute, through the tunnel, and you'll find yourself in the 14th dimension. So I went up and up and up and up and up, and I kept going up and up. And then I found myself in a place where I suppose the oxygen was a bit like it was quite hard to breathe. It reminded me, I think, of reading that book, A Wrinkle in Time, where they travel through a place where it's not that great to breathe. And it was a bit like that, where breathing was a bit funny. And so I checked in on my body. And when I checked in on my body, my mercury fillings were pulsating like in my mouth. And so then I went back out of my body and again felt myself in the area that the breathing wasn't great. And then I felt, well, then Sarah appeared beside me and started. At this point, our Skype was on, but we weren't speaking on it because we weren't in our bodies. And then she started hosing me down. With a power hose, and that went on for a long time. So then I came back to my body and spoke to her, and I said, oh, you're hosing me down like you do before. You know, they put people in nut houses, mental hospitals, they, in the old asylums in the old days, hose them down.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, no, I'm just showering you with light, golden light, but it appears that way. And then I went back there and I still felt that. But it's weird, those leech things started coming off. You know, we talked about them before and I've had
Oh, yeah.
and I
I
felt
found
sorry.
I found my dreams about them. I had 2 dreams. Well, apparently no, I've had more dreams, but I because I've got a dream diary. Yeah, I was dreaming about them early last year, but in my dreams, I was interpreting them as seals or
Who?
eels, black seals or eels.
Yes, they're like eels. One of them was wrapped
Yeah,
around my head. It was horrible. I mean, she said they were archons. I'm not sure. I'm not sure they're because they don't seem like they're beings. They seem like leeches,
yeah,
literally just leeches that are taking
yeah.
the energy and pushing it back, probably to and fro. I don't think that they're animate themselves. I think they are, yeah, just like little parasites. I don't
I,
think they have brains.
I don't know. In the first dream, I was just looking out of a window. I was in a like I'm always seem to be looking out windows in my dreams in houses, but I saw them coming out of the ground, and I wrote down they gave me a very bad feeling. And then next thing, this huge one appeared, and then they kind of disappeared. They transformed into something else. And then in the next dream I had, which was a few weeks later, um, I was like sticking them up. I was vomiting them out of myself. Like there was loads
Yes,
of them.
they do come out. But I sometimes go to Richmond Park. I stand by a stream and I say, just command them to leave me, and I can feel them like like coughing out of my throat. Of course,
Oh,
it's
really?
etheric. It's not, but yeah, you cough them up. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, that's interesting then. But the first one I've made a note. I've put that I keep dreaming about these black seals. So something was going on. So that's really. Do you feel like they've gone from you at the moment then?
Well, I feel like because I before I did the 14th dimension thing with Sarah, I was aware of them. I went to a meeting in a Masonic hall. It was a little course. I didn't know it was being held there, and when I they had the floors like the chest things and everything. I had a good
Seen
old
it,
nose.
yeah.
It was fascinating. And then when I came out, I felt really weird. And I remember I phoned Miles Johnson and he said, maybe you've picked up attachments. And that was the first time I went to that stream because I was just by the stream in Richmond Park. And I stood there by the river and I said, anything dirty, leave me. And that was the first time I saw those little creatures. And I came back and I looked on YouTube and somebody else had done, it was a young man, he'd done a YouTube about it. He called them parasites, dark parasites. He'd done it. And then when, doing like readings for people, I had sometimes looked over their chakras just with my hand and like pulled some out, just cleaned them, pulled them out. So I did have a big
Yeah.
knowledge of them. But when Sarah took me to the 14th, actually, I think that's a good way of cleaning somebody because it was done quite quickly. But I did feel, I don't think I'm clear of them. And I did feel when I was watching telly, I do like some of the stuff on Netflix, but I know they deliberately show you gory stuff. I was watching that really rubbish TV series, The Sinner, and it was some serial killer type guy, and it was really cheesy. They were using that Nietzschean Superman, where the serial killer wants to be a Superman. And as we know, well, as I know after studying serial killers for so long, they don't think like that. That's what they say to people that go and study them in prison because they don't know why they've done it. Basically, they've been, I think, possessed or covered in these creatures that
Yeah.
have or whatever stronger entities. So they come out with all sorts of shit like, oh, I wanted to be like the Nietzschean Superman. So this writer had picked that up and she'd made this guy like meet this other guy and they were like, oh, let's kill, it'll make us like Nietzschean Superman and do what thou will is the whole of the law and all that
Oh,
Crowley and
God.
rubbish.
Netflix has got a massive satanic agenda. I cancelled it because
It
one,
has it's
propaganda
massive.
tool.
It's
Two,
massive.
it's satanic.
Massive. They even did, I don't know if you've seen, and it was a bloody friend of mine on Facebook, an intelligent girl, friend of Julie Birchall's, Nadia something, and she said, oh, I really love Hereditary. It was great. So I watched it, and I was more and more disgusted as time went by. Not only was the storyline flat, it was what I call true occult, where it was like, somebody knows their shit about the occult and has written a movie around it, but it's to Dirty the Watcher, and it was all about Payman. You know, Payman, that's one of the demon princes, and he really is a demon prince. It was about him taking over the body of a girl, and these other people had been sacrificing, and they were in a cult, and she was up near the ceiling, and it was Toni Collette. And I looked at Toni Collette. I thought, you dirty, dirty bitch. This is a really horrible satanic movie.
She's done some bloody good films. What the hell is she doing messing around with things like that?
I know, it just made me feel bad about
Oh,
her.
I feel it as well, and I haven't even seen it.
Maybe she didn't read. Don't watch it. It's just nasty. It's just nasty. And that they would use someone like Payman, and people watch that, and you could tell people, young people might Google it. Oh, I wonder who Payman is. He's a real demon, and yes, you can conjure him up. And that's what they were doing. They were conjuring him up, and then they were getting powers from that. So many of these movies, like The Sinner. So it was written about this serial killer, or he was going to become a serial killer, and the detective was following him. And he kept like fantasizing slitting necks. They have so much net slitting on Netflix with the blood pouring out.
Disgusting. I hate that.
Oh, it's horrible.
I think it's spiritual pollution.
It is. As I was watching it, I felt like that when I saw it. It was one where he smashed someone's face, slit someone's neck, and it was a blood fest on the screen. And I felt one of those black things just silently go like plop onto my head and scratch. And I thought, whoa, no, you don't. And I kind of cast it out, by the power of Jesus Christ. I command you to leave. I cover you in the blood of Christ. I did that, and it kind of melted and kind of went. But I think when we see things like that, it sort of,
Yeah, I think that's what its purpose is.
Yes.
And plus, they're pushing an agenda, and they're trying to introduce the idea of demons more and more, and people having interaction with demons.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. I mean, it's like the spiritual war rages on, and one of the tools.
Exactly, and how that it is demonically charged. Some of the writing in, not obviously The Sinner, it was shit, but some of their things like The Queen of the South, that was about drug dealing. Some of the writing in it is superb, and that it's demonically charged, that the writers had help, that had supernatural help. You can tell.
Really?
Because it's... Pardon?
Tell. Is it the energy around it?
It's so sharp, and knowing and you read some stuff isn't that pretty. So, like say Sarah Walters, and you get really good stuff. Yeah, you do, but not all the time. And often when you're doing, series and stuff, then it dips in the middle, doesn't it? It gets a bit shitty. But some of these new series they're coming out with, all the way through, every episode is sharp, and you think this is almost like otherworldly. It's too good. And then, of course, you start seeing all the blood splattered across the scene, and you think, oh, okay. But I think it's to lure us in, isn't it? To make us.
I don't know. Do you believe that that sort of relationship between films and reality? Because do you remember when Batman came out and Heath Ledger played the Joker, the Christian Bale Batman, the Dark Knight? So, and then next thing, Heath Ledger's dead. And I've watched that film a few times. I think some films are energetically charged. I'm convinced of it.
Oh,
because that film has got something. That film has got a signature, an energetic signature. Now, I wouldn't say that it's evil. It's powerful. There's something about that film. There's something about certain films, and I don't know how they do it, but they do it. And Dark Knight is one of them. And I really like. I was peed off because I really like the director of the Dark Knight. He's made quite a lot of films, good films. But there's certain films that I just think are carrying an energetic message, and I think that's one of them. And maybe Heath Ledger was the sacrifice. You know what I mean?
Definitely demonic. I think Netflix is out the front when it comes to that. It's unbelievable. Not only is a lot of their stuff really, really good, and I think that's because they're getting help, supernatural help. Well, obviously, the writers, and then they're going, and then they're getting their stuff made on it. It's a real channel for them, isn't it?
I've got a theory about Breaking Bad.
I haven't seen that.
Right. Well, this was about 8 or 9 years ago, I think. No, it'd be 10 years ago. So Breaking Bad came out, and I was still watching TV then, and it came out on terrestrial, but they were showing it quite late at night, like at 11,
Oh,
and it didn't seem to sort of really take off.
oh,
But all of a sudden, it was around about 2012, I think, 2013, something like that. All of a sudden, it just kind of exploded, and everybody was watching Breaking Bad, and everybody was binging on it, streaming it and binging on it, all over, everybody. And I
oh.
remember like there was loads of like Walter White things you could get when it came around to Christmas. There was loads of like Breaking Bad paraphernalia that you could buy. I mean, I even bought some. I've got like um, Heisenberg coffee mug from HMV.
Oh.
So, and I thought, this is really weird. I mean, I know there are sleepers in films and series on TV, but this felt different. It felt like somebody somewhere had decided that this was going to have a huge magical charge behind it, and it was just going to explode. And it did. It was just, so it was like nothing, 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 and then all of a sudden, boom, it's vastly popular,
Mm.
and quite rightly, because it is, an interesting story. I mean, it's when you think about it, though, they're doing a switch on you because it's completely immoral. The story,
Oh,
it's not.
there's a lot of that. I mean, there was the Black series on BBC One. I can't remember what it's called. It was all about black drug dealers, and then Queen of the South on Netflix. They're drug dealers, and then of course the Ozarks. They're drug dealers. So it has us constantly morally, like, because they're so charismatic, so good looking, so charming,
Yeah,
and often good-hearted, even though they're dealing drugs. You kind of want to be like them, and you kind of I think if I was
yeah.
younger, I'd want to be a drug dealer after watching Queen of
But
the South.
when you look at the reality of crystal meth and what it does to people, and the other thing is, I mean, like there is a belief that crystal meth is one way you can get yourself demonically possessed. Um,
Probably.
but when you think about the whole thing around crystal meth and the destruction it causes and the evil, and then you look at the drug cartels
Mm.
that are involved in the transportation of it, like how was shown in Breaking Bad. But see, you're rooting for somebody who, all right, he has cancer, he's Walter White and all that, Heisenberg. Um, you're rooting for somebody who is causing the destruction of a great number of people, but you
Mm.
don't see that bit.
No,
And when you think about it, was that an energy harvesting
probably.
for the energy of the people really liking it,
Yeah.
going back to the cartels? Because they do
Yeah,
stuff like that.
maybe. Yeah, must something's going on. They definitely glamorize the shit out of them. And of course, in Queen of the South, they were using voodoo as well,
No,
as they were
surprised
going.
me.
That encourages you. I mean, the whole thing is just encouraging. I mean, talk about and the way they talk about it, and the BBC are doing it a lot as well. They had something. Now, what was that called? Mafia, Mafia. He was drug dealing, and the way they do it, they treat it like a business, and that was super glamorous. You were on the side of the guy, and it just, I don't know, it sort of
Yeah,
encourages you to snort cocaine, encourages you to. So I think one would being a dealer. In fact, it's quite a good move. It's very glamorous, and there's all that going on. So people are banging on. I think about oh, child abuse, while we're all being sort of
but
raped,
but
basically.
yeah, all that goes hand in hand. Or traffic
Yes.
people, the same people that traffic people and children and sexually exploit children are involved in the drug world as well.
Yeah, there was that trafficking. Actually, it was yeah. You're right. In both Queen of the South and McMafia, there was girls being trafficked.
Yeah.
That's awful, isn't it? That whole thing of that. I mean, you just want to die afterwards. I think if you've just been made to sleep with guys one after another and stuff like that, you just want to die afterwards.
Well, it's truly evil, but the times that we're living on, I'm not surprised that I think it's been going on for a long time. It's just sort of like a lot of things, the veil's been lifted now when we know the true horrors of the world that we're living in, but at least it gives us a chance to fight it. But remember, this is a battle on a spiritual level.
Mm,
So at the bottom of all these things in 3D reality that are horrific, we are fighting a spiritual battle.
mm.
So you have to look at things energetically, I think, and that's why I don't watch TV. And I definitely will never subscribe to Netflix again. I'm very picky about the films that I watch. But definitely some things. It yeah. There's a lot more than meets the eye, a lot more. But there's like legends around certain films, isn't there? Um, some of it is probably BS just to sort of glam up the film, but I think Hollywood is so dark and the film industry can be so dark. I definitely believe some shit's gone on around films. Absolutely. I mean, the paedophilia aspect of Hollywood aside, I mean, they're heavily meant to be heavily involved in Satanism, aren't they? And all kinds of things. But you
But
probably,
isn't it like, sometimes I stop a movie or stop a TV series and look and something about the actor or the actress, and I sort of pause it and look deep in their eyes, and you almost see something that's like non-human. You always
really,
kind of can feel it like they're non-human. So it's probably that. It's probably these, or I don't know, or is it that if we get filled up by enough of these black parasites that we become non-human, like in that Lucy when she totally became like
oh yes, I've seen that. Yeah,
she got covered in that black. I
it's
mean,
that's Black Goo, Miles's favourite subject.
but these are like these black like little eels. I mean, but I could imagine
Well,
what it
not those again.
might feel like. I mean, I was waking up every morning and, feeling sad and thinking sad thoughts and thinking, bad future. And I would attribute it, I suppose, to those, because you can tell it's not normal, to think that way, and it's quite weak. But, you have to, I think we have to look at that it probably is non-human and it probably is some kind of demonic attack, if not some kind of different non-human entities, whether they're demonic or whether they're from somewhere else, that definitely humanity is under attack by them, and they definitely want that kind of Netflixy thing to go on for us all to. It's almost like get out of the body or something, and maybe like because if we watch people being chopped up and having their necks slit, you automatically check out of your body because you think, oh, I don't want my neck slit. I don't want to be in a place where people get their necks slit all the time. So you kind of, when you're watching it, you kind of pop out of your body, and maybe it's that they want to take over our bodies. Maybe it's these beings that want to use our fleshy bodies, and that's part of it. That's part of these parasites. Maybe the parasites are a little place marker for them. I'm not sure, or maybe humanity has always had those little parasites, and maybe these beings want us to dump them and then sort of let them sort of taxi ride on us. I mean, there's a lot
I
of
don't. I think there's lots of different scenarios myself
yeah, there
because
probably is.
you've got to remember some people invite things to come in them,
Yeah.
like in voodoo and things like that, and so whoever comes in them can enjoy our reality and can drink and smoke weed and have sex and
Mm,
enjoy physical pleasures. But then they get the knowledge and they get, how like demons are and entities like that are outside of time and space, so they have they have knowledge of the future. They can tell you loads of things, so you get the knowledge. And some people want them, invite them in for a while, and then get them out again. People who've got the ability to do that. But yeah, there's
And of course,
definitely.
of course, these days as well, there's all, a lot of psychics are getting famous, and I suppose it's tempting for them to sort of, hook up with these. I've come across them quite a lot on Shamanic Journey and Out of My Body. But there was one who looked like that actor. God, that actor in Primal Scream, that one, the younger one, not Richard Gere, the younger one, I can't remember his name. He looked exactly like him, and he was surrounded by women, and I found him absolutely fascinating. And I said, "What are you?" And he wouldn't tell me. And he said, "Are you here to spy on me?" And I'm like, "No." And I don't know, that they're absolutely fascinating, these beings. And I saw one when Sarah was doing, we were chatting last night, and she said, "Do you want to go up to the 14th?" And I went up there with her, and I encountered like a being like that as well up there in the 14th. I mean, they get about, I think, these, I don't know what they are, but I know that they want to hold on us. I know that they, well, they're better than us, aren't they? And are they demons? And if they are demons, they do know more than us, because they're linked with the fallen angels, and they're cleverer than us. We're actually like guinea pigs compared to them. We really are.
Yeah. Well, what did he look like? This one that you met recently? Did he look human?
Yeah, human, just like the one that looked like that, the actor. And I'll try and remember the actor. He was in that movie with Richard Gere. Same, yeah, same. Gosh, what is his name? He was in that Incredible Hulk as well. Yeah, they just look like men. But they're sort of they're like shimmery. They're not, they're above men. Obviously, they're in the astral. Well, they look like they're physical. Obviously, they look human, but it's like you can tell they're above it. You can tell that they're able to journey wherever the hell they want with a blink of an eye. You can tell you're facing something extraordinary.
Right.
So, what do they want with humanity? Really, we are so far beneath them. It's sort of, what do they want with us?
I don't know. I don't know apart from energy.
Sex, drinking,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah, must be. I think we're going to a break in a minute.
Okay.
Well, maybe not.
Oh, is the break not on? I was going to tell you about something that I saw. Slightly changing the subject. But
Yeah,
you know
that's
about cloning, don't you?
I'm not sure I believe that, Donald.
Yeah, I watched him again recently, Donald Marshall. But I watched a thing. This young rapper, I think he's called Kid Badoo or something, and this is from like 2 years ago. And he was talking about he was a clone.
Who?
And he was talking about this Kid Badoo is a young guy, is a really young guy, and he's a rapper in America.
Oh, right.
And he was talking quite openly and calmly about being a clone.
Oh.
And he said, "Yeah, I'm the second generation. This here is the second generation of me." And I was like, "Really?" And he was talking to I watched two things of him. Can't remember who he was talking to, but he was saying that originally he talked about the Raelians. You've heard about the Raelians, haven't you? That cult in Switzerland. So he said the Raelians, because I think they're big into cloning, got a piece of his skull or something and brought it over to America. So, and then they did a first version of him, and then this is the second version of him. And he was talking about being the second generation, and he said about he had a serial number. He said his serial number, and he said it was called Clonaid that made him, a company called Clonaid. I thought, am I really hearing this? And he was being perfectly serious, and this wasn't like a alternative news truther thing. And then the next one that I watched about him, it was like on a rap competition. He'd either entered or won like a rap competition.
Oh,
So it
and who is this again? A
was
black.
something like Kid Badoo or something.
He's
I'll
famous,
find
is
it.
he?
I'm not sure. I'll find it and send it to you. So
Okay.
this was a bit like an X Factor thing. And again, it was nothing to do with alternative news or anything. It was a rap thing. And
But he's famous, is he or not?
I think he's done quite well. He's from Florida, but
Right.
there's something not right about him. There
Hmm.
is something not right about this young man.
I always find it hard to believe that when people say they clone, because I always think it seems so like a bit arrogant. You know, I've been cloned. I'm so
This
damn
guy
special.
wasn't. But
What?
he's talking to the host and the
Oh, hang on a
MC.
sec.
Oh, here we go. Right, tell you when I get back.
Okay.
Okay, we back.
Oh, great. Are we? Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh,
So
I
I'll just finish off quick. So
right.
it's
Okay,
Kid
sure.
Boo. I found it. So it's Kid as in KIDBUU. So yeah, he was on this show, talent show, and he talks about being a clone. And the
Oh.
guy's like, yeah, how you finding the music business? So it's really interesting. But yeah, Tom McDonald, who is really, really popular, top of his game, did a song called Clone Rappers. But this Kid Boo said a really interesting thing. He said that Michael Jackson was one of the first.
Oh.
And the reason why they do it is to keep on making money out of you.
All right.
So I just thought that was very interesting because nobody's really sort of covered it since Donald Marshall, like you were saying, and that was yonks ago. And now it's like going into the mainstream.
Oh,
So,
I know James Casbolt liked Donald Marshall. I just personally, I know I don't go for it. I just,
mm,
I just don't. Yeah, I don't know why. I just don't. I just think, yeah.
mm.
I just don't.
I'm going to investigate it. I think this is really interesting. I think this could be an interesting rabbit hole. I think it's one of the best kept secrets and it's leaking out now because there is a lot of rumors about different people that are meant to be cloned. Meant to be like Mike Tyson is meant to be from the DNA of a bodyguard of Nefertiti or something.
Oh.
So I wouldn't put it past them to do things like that.
I just don't think people are that special. I think they're there and they're interesting. I think if they came again, people would think, oh, whatever, unless it's someone like Elvis. Elvis was fascinating. I suppose Hitler was fascinating. One-offs like that. But I think they can come back again in different forms and be just as like interesting.
Well, what do you think then about rumors about people who fake their own fake deaths, fake that they're dead, but they're really alive? They just wanted to get out of being famous or whatever. Or do you think there's anything in that, or do you think it's just like tabloid trash kind of thing? National Enquirer, reporter for the National Enquirer.
Yeah. I do. I mean, mainstream is funny, isn't it? People slag it off mainstream, but I work for a journalist and on Fleet Street, and you can get in stories as long as you're clever about it. You can get stories past the editor and in the paper. It's up to individual journalists. I think news editors don't always have their hands on the pulse. I think people make a fuss about alternative, like, oh, we've been lied to, oh, and here's the truth. And I just think people are being manipulated all over again. I mean, look at that Brian Rose guy. I mean, and they're asking for money as well. I think if people,
Oh yeah,
oh
yeah.
God, he's such a, and I don't know why David Icke went on there. For disappointed in David as for doing that. I did text him and say I felt, disappointed. I said I don't think it was a very good, very good idea. And all these people coming forward saying, "Oh, I'm the one that's going to be telling the truth, and they're trying to be like messiahs. And that's why I did like, what the um, and
Okay.
came out with, because I think she was sharp to see that it is like cult creating, but it's cult creating not because they want to create a cult and have passion for that like some people do. It's a money cult. It's all about money. It's follow me and give me money and I'll tell you the truth of things, like bloody Jesus or something. I will tell you the truth. I am the light.
Right.
Follow me and pay me while you're at it and make me
Yeah.
famous, and it's just nonsense. And it's all while banging the drum of, and mainstream are lying to us. Well, it's just made out of people, and maybe the owner is, a piece of shit, whatever. But you will get some truth out of the mainstream media. It's just they've got agendas, and if you just read it, with the idea, okay, this is an agenda, this is having this viewpoint, oh, and they're not telling us that. If you've got a brain, you can work it out yourself. You don't need someone to come on YouTube and go, I'm the light. You're slightly retarded, so I'm going to be your light. And that's what they're doing, though, isn't it? And pay me as much as you can, and I'm going to tell all you stupid, retarded people about how it is and what it's like, and I'm alternative. So I'm really, really truthful, and I'm really, really good because I'm saying I'm alternative. And that's what's going down. And I was sucker because I'd worked in mainstream and knew they were just a complete load of misogynistic bastards, really, just the whole thing of it, even behind the scenes, is so ugly and rapey and just vile. And so I ran into that with open arms, and I thought, oh, this is amazing. This is like all good, this is so good and so truthful. And, I'm just going to find truth and go walking off into the light. And it's just not like that. You get led up the garden path.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
And,
it's like anything, like
pardon?
anything. It's like anything, like feminism, politics, you name it. If you come across something, you're naive, you think, oh yeah, this is like exactly what I'm looking for. This is brilliant, and you're all starry-eyed, and then after a while, you start to realise it's just like anything else that involves people.
Yes, yes,
Um, it's
exactly.
like
It's bloody corrupt. And,
psychopaths,
yeah,
doctors,
exactly.
egotists, and then people go mad with power and they turn into arseholes. And you just end up thinking, what the hell? Why did I bother with that?
And you can
It's just,
get hurt from it because, like Mars Johnson saying that I was somehow mates with Michael Aquino. Peter, oh, it's the truth community, so that's truthful. And he was lying off his little ass. I didn't have that guy's phone number. Why would I have his phone number? I sent him a few emails. Well, I'm not his chum. It's actually Miles that is his chum and had him.
I was
Pardon?
about to say that. What's the point in him saying that when he's done about what is it, 3 interviews with him
And
and
they
kissed
were
his
really
ass
ass
halfway
kissing.
through them?
They were
Yeah,
ass kissing.
sir, the Satanist in chief, sir. Oh, God, pair Miles. Honestly.
I know, and I got so battered by people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. You couldn't do that." And I got so scared that I thought, "Oh, I won't do it." And I could have interviewed him, but then I didn't because I got scared that people would call me names and say, "Oh, you love evil, don't you?" And I got so tired of that. I thought, "Oh, right, I'm not going to do it." And I was already being spoken about in that way, so I backed off completely. Mars didn't ask him not one thing about that Monarch program. And I thought, right, finally, when he'd interviewed him and didn't get, kicked to the curb, well, that's strange, and he didn't get attacked. So then I thought, well, I'll do it. And then I emailed him and said, I want to interview you now. And he goes, oh, what will you be talking about? And I said, oh, the Monarch program. And he said, oh, that doesn't exist. And then when I kept on and said, well, it does, and he said, if I talked about that, then I'd end up dead. So obviously I'm not going to talk about it. So that was
Sorry.
an admitting. But wouldn't that be better if that was said on air and he couldn't get away from me? Because then I could push him a bit more and say, well, what do you actually think of it? Being a black magician and somebody that can astral travel. What do you think about, it's an occult crime, isn't it? And it's actually dark shamanism, the way they smash them into altars. They get one of the altars, they're hypnotized. And what do you actually think of it? I could have asked him that, but it's wasted my chance because of how the truth community gets on and how they use that. We're truthful and it's abused, then because gossip is seen as like truth in the truth community, in the
Oh yeah.
alternative media. And so I got smeared with that I was somehow his little buddy poo. And so I backed off. And that way they lost out on something that would have been good, that would have uncovered something that he would have had to have given his opinion on it. And if he'd have said, oh, I don't know about things like that, I would say, well, you're not really a good Satanist, are you, mate? Because if you are a Satanist, you certainly would know about astral journeying. You certainly would know about dark occult. So why don't you know about it then? And where would he go with that? What would he say? But I didn't get my opportunity because I was being smeared as murdering Max, as in with a
No, you're
keynote.
very busy indeed, busy
But it,
girl.
and that's how the truth movement goes, and that's how it's a dangerous place. Quite frankly, I would rather the mainstream, because at least in the mainstream they get a story in and they have to legal it three different ways. And I know that because I work there, and people say things like, oh, there's lies in there, there's lies in there, there's lies in there. But if they write lies about people, they can sue. These people can sue and they can get an awful lot of money. And stories have to be three times legalized from different sources before they finally made it into the newspaper. So really, it's safer than this alternative where they can say absolutely anything about people and get away with it, you know?
Well, yes. I mean, that's one of the pitfalls, isn't it, of the, like you say, of the alternative media, is that people can make up all kinds of
Yeah, and somebody
stuff
just
about it,
mentioned to
as you
me,
know.
yeah, somebody just mentioned Douglas Dietrich, a friend of mine, just messaged me talking about Stephen. Hi, Stephen. Douglas Dietrich. And Douglas has come out with all sorts of terrible, terrible things. And, you
Oh
know,
God, yeah. Well, I've stopped listening to him
yeah,
because I thought it was disgraceful,
yeah.
utterly disgraceful, and there's no excuse for that whatsoever.
I know he was raped as a child, and I know that for sure because I know because it happened to me. I can tell other people it's happened to, and he told me it happened to him, and of course I can tell it has because the way just the way he is, you know. And but yeah, you shouldn't talk about things like that.
Not anybody's kids. No, you don't.
Exactly.
No,
And again,
no.
that's that
But
Aquino thing saying, oh, that some 85-year-old man who's got cancer has somehow come to London to stay at my house. And then he says, I live in Kensington. I don't live in Kensington. I put that out there on my Twitter one time because I was getting stalked by that guy. So I thought, well, I'll say I live like, where I don't live. And because he said, oh, when you do the show, you've got to say where you live. So I said, well, Kensington then, because it's the nicest part of London.
why do
Americans
you
are
have to say
listening.
where you live? Well, it's
Pardon?
a load of rubbish. Why do you have to say where you live?
Oh, I
It's
know. So he
ridiculous.
could say, and then he says, oh, Akina comes to her mansion in Kensington.
Oh,
And then he said what he did, which is also disgusting.
yeah.
And so
Well,
that's
like
the
I said,
trouble. That's the trouble with this truth media and this Robbie Williams thinking he's joining it, and it's all, he reminds me of me tripping up the garden path, and oh, that's the
Robbie
way.
Williams is a very vulnerable man. I mean, about way back, about 10 years ago, he was on Above Top Secret. He came on Above Top Secret. Mind you, there was a phase of like famous people joining Top Secret and going on forums for a while. It was strange. But anyway, he came on to talk about his UFO experience in LA, and he was just absolutely swamped with people asking him questions. I think he'd seen a black triangle, which is ours anyway. So he has dipped his toe in this area kind of thing, generally speaking, before. But somebody like Robbie Williams should not enter into this arena. really not enter into this arena because it is just, it's not only filled with unscrupulous people and pervs and con artists, it's also got, national security people, intelligence people infiltrating it. I mean, basically anything that people get together that gets infiltrated, they want to find out what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. It is really, isn't it? I mean, gosh, I've got this friend texting me. Well, call him a friend. Really bitchy stuff. I
Is he
hate
saying, who's he saying nasty things about?
Well, he introduced it's Paul Stevenson, a fellow host who's also a friend of mine. He introduced me to his ex-girlfriend who didn't have work at the time, and I introduced her to an investigator, private investigator who had little bits of work. And I'd said that she'd done it before. She hadn't done it before, but I did that to help her out. And she didn't turn up for a job one day. I was a bit upset because he again thought it was me. I'd let him down. I'd recommended her, blah, de blah. Let her off doing that, forgave her. And then she spoke to me a few other times. She very much encouraged me to do the breakfast show with Brian Harvey that he wanted to do with me. Fair enough. She liked Brian Harvey. And then suddenly she blocked me. So I thought, well, fair enough. And then Paul, who hadn't been speaking to her, was supposed to meet me yesterday. And then he said, oh, I'm going out with this girl. And I was like, oh. I said, actually, I feel a bit insulted because I tried to help her and she blocked me. And now I'm supposed to be meeting you for the day. But you're like, oh, I'm just going out with her. And I felt a little bit offended. And now he's saying to me, you should grow up. You're, knocking on. You should
really, sweetie.
apologize. And then he calls me a lesbian. Pardon?
He's a small man.
Oh,
Are we dealing with a case of small man syndrome?
He says this is exactly why I never introduced you to her, because you're so easily triggered and a psychopath, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, probably a lesbian, really, at the depth of
and
hurt
a lesbian.
Women. Pardon?
Is that? Oh, he's not got a very good imagination, has he?
But he says to me, probably a lesbian.
Like path on the warpath, right? Okay.
But
All right.
he says
Bye,
probably
Felicia. Bye.
yeah, probably a lesbian at the depths of hurt women cause you. She hasn't caused me the depths of her. I just feel a bit annoyed at him that I had to, now probably because he was so obsessed with this girl. Whenever he'll meet me now, which, oh God, he'll go on about her and, oh, she's so beautiful. She looks like, who did she say she looked like? Which is totally didn't look like some Hollywood actress. And I just don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about somebody that's,
go away for a minute, so don't make me laugh because there could be an accident. Go on, who does she look like, this girl?
Oh, who's that stunning actress that was with Al Pacino in that movie? Not in Heat. Was it Heat when she played the daughter in Heat? She did, I think, play the daughter. Natalie Portman, that's it. He said she looked like Natalie Portman. She doesn't look like Natalie bloody Portman. It's complete rubbish. Anyway, I was quite willing to help the girl out. I was quite willing to chat with her as a friend. But she sort of turned around, and not only when I forgave her for shitting on this guy who was giving me little bits of work, and I was trying to get more work from him rather than little bits of work, she then blocked me. And I thought, well, sod that, And then he's expecting me to sort of, tolerate that he's friends with her again. Fine, but, fine and goff, but don't come to me and expect me to hear just, him talking about her all the time. And that's merely what I said. And according to that, that makes me a lesbian. I know, because it's hilarious. Because he says, I'm hurt by her, but I'm not hurt by her. But I'm not going to sit with someone hearing about. And he says it's not normal for heterosexual girls. So I'm not a girl, I'm a woman. Not in my experience. So there we have it. Mary lover. Oh my God. I have been nice and tolerated you.
What's a Mary lover? What, the Holy Mother?
No,
Oh God, honestly, why do you waste time with this challenging person who is bringing no positivity into your life?
oh, I know. And then he says, "I've tried being nice to you."
Oh,
Oh God! And now he weirdly, I was telling him about the astral journey healing I did with Sarah, and he said, "Oh, that's covert for lesbian activity, going up,
oh, we've got a bit of an
going
obsession,
go."
haven't we? Oh
Yeah,
dear.
he
When does
said
it lesbian?
"Oh, going up a tunnel. That's obviously means her vagina."
You know
He said,
what? I think it's just a bit strange. You know,
"I
like,
know,
when gentlemen have to entertain themselves, I think he might have to entertain himself, maybe, and then he'll stop calling you a lesbian. Honestly. Listen, I'm going to have to just peel off for a minute. I'll be back in a second. Sorry about this. All right.
oh sure, that's okay." Right, okay, I'm going to keep the show going. So we are talking about, we were talking about the alternative media, and I was getting abusive texts through from somebody supposed to be a friend, but turns out just wants to send me insulting things. It is hard when people treat you in a shabby way. It is hard when you try and help people, try and get them work, and they turn around and they block you. Obviously, then you don't really want to hear from them or hear of them. Again, if people treat you in a shabby way, then you don't want to hear from them. I don't want to hear from them. I don't think that's overreacting. I don't think that makes me gay. So are you back now?
Sorry about
Oh,
that.
oh,
Yeah,
no
back.
worries. That's okay.
Uh,
Yeah, so I'm
is
just
this
brushing that
anything else?
aside. Pardon?
Is this out else? Sent any more hilarious little snippets of, you know, is he still really challenged? Do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I am tired of, about my past, my sexual abuse, making me tolerate men that are abusive. I mean, I've been doing it all my life, and I'm like knocking on a bit now. I mean, when do I stop doing it? When does it happen? You know?
Well, what exactly do you want to happen then?
I think I just like to have male friends that are nice and obviously date somebody, not being a lesbian, date a man who is nice as well. I mean, I don't know, that psychic upset me. Mike Baker, I'm not going to slag off Mike Baker saying, "Oh, JamesCasbolt is my future."
Oh, yeah, right, okay. Yeah, that's going to work, isn't it?
And that made me
Uh,
feel bad because I thought I've been there, I've done that. I've been with people that call women moo packs and all that. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm getting older. And I see women, and when I lived in that sort of nice area, I saw women who had mansions, who were covered in emeralds and rubies, and none of them had worked, not a day in their life. So I've worked my bloody ass off since I was a teenager, not stopped. And they'd not worked, and they got it all from men. And I looked at them and I thought, what's the difference between me, who's only ever had men wipe their ass on them, and them who get kneeled in front of and handed a mansion and handed rubies and emeralds?
yeah,
And taken on holiday to the Caribbean and many, many things. What's the difference?
but it's not that simple, is it? I mean, it's not that simple. They're all you're seeing is the facade. That life will come at a price. I
Oh,
mean,
does it?
well, yeah, of course it does. I mean, um, for one thing, there'll be a chance that they'll get dumped for a younger model because men that have got money and power have the pick of women, don't they? So you'll get dumped for a younger model, and then all right, you might get some money from a divorce settlement and all that, but so you're not going to have necessarily emotionally healthy relationships with people. Um, Nah, I think where's lives like that, all right, they look like you've got loads of freedom and loads of choice, and you have in some ways, but then in other ways, it's a prison.
Hmm.
It's a prison. Because you think about how desperate you'll be to keep that life. Um, nah, nah. I think sometimes the hardest things are the most valuable things because they teach you really valuable lessons that you'll never learn any other way. And that
Hmm.
doesn't go for everything because I know horrendous things happen to people. So I'm not making this a very general statement, but I'm saying some things. That's my opinion anyway.
But
But I know what you mean. I know what you're talking.
yeah, I think I've just seen the bad side of men. And I know men aren't princes, and I know they haven't got white horses and they're not going to save us. And I know that now. But, a bit of kindness wouldn't go amiss. But it seems like I've known just, pretty damn abusive. And I think maybe that's from one's father. You get your father, and it's like giving a dog. A sniff of a hunting dog, a sniff of a shirt, and it's covered in a certain smell, and you kind of bond with it, maybe, I think, my adoptive father was, first of all, he was a paedophile, then he was like a real creep, he was a misogynist, he was weak, he couldn't really work, he pounced, and that's it for me, I go for men that are really weak, but like to pretend they're strong, and I bolster their egos by telling them lies and that they're strong and
You're attracting a certain kind of energy to you then, aren't you? But this is the thing that happens with people that are vulnerable. They attract people like that to them. And I'm not saying, oh God, that's come out completely wrong.
no, it's true.
Energetically, you do. And it's like the thing about how, over the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about empathic people attracting narcissistic sociopaths and things like that. And they home in on that energy. It's like nectar to them. And I think when you're vulnerable, you don't have your shark cage, you don't have your boundaries, you don't have all these things that you need to have up, because you don't know healthy relationships. So you can't discern, what's good, what's bad, and it's a learning process, and you're still learning. But I mean, it sounds like you know what you want now and what you're
Hmm.
willing to cope with.
But it's hard, isn't it? I remember like being in Belfast and being attracted to the terror men out there, and friends saying, "Oh, don't get a normal guy." And I remember dating a normal guy, and we went out for a drive, and he punched my leg. I mean, he punched my leg. And I've been going out with him like for a few months and just got in the car, and he was annoyed about what I'd kept him waiting because I was on the phone to my friend, and he just punched my leg. And I remember he drove off then, and we were driving into the depths of the Irish countryside, and I thought, I've got another
Mm.
one. I found another one. He was normal. He wasn't a terrorist. He was worked in an office, and I thought I got another one. I mean, I don't know, unless all men are like that, but I find that hard to believe as well. Like all women aren't bitchy.
No, not all men are like that. No. I mean, that's somebody who's got poor self-control. Um, but and maybe it's cultural as well. He thought it was acceptable to do that, to a woman or whoever. Um, yeah, I know what you mean. Um, but the thing is, it's like when you learn about domestic violence, when you've been in one domestic violence relationship, it can make you vulnerable to being in another one
Why is
because
that?
because you've been bashed down so much. And so you need like to retrain yourself, retrain. So there's courses that you can go on. Um, there's courses that's been written by a probation officer that spent about 10 years working with perpetrators, and from working with the perpetrators of domestic violence, which were men. And from working with those men, she worked out the kinds of abuse. There's about 10 different kinds of abusers, that all have the same traits. Like there's the crazy maker. There's one that'll just do things that he'll know that will make you really angry, and then turn around and say, "Oh, look at her, she's really nuts." But
Oh,
he's
I get that. Yeah, Paul is like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, you can go on courses so you recognise the signs. B, you know how to extricate yourself from that. What is good, what is bad for you. How to have boundaries up. What how to assert yourself. So there's ways that you can learn. Now, I'm not saying domestic violence doesn't happen to men, because it does. It does. But from a relationship energy point of view, you do find that women find themselves in these kind of situations not more than once.
Mm.
So there are reasons for that. And I think, not just looking on a 3D level, there's different things going on. So you just need to like change a lot of things about yourself, because remember, you can't control necessarily things and the people that are going on around you that you're interacting with, but you can control how you react to things, and you can control how you respond to things, and what course of action you're going to take and what you're going to say. So you do have control over that, but it's learning that, and it's learning the best responses to people like that. If somebody acts like that towards you, if somebody punches you in the leg in a car, and what would be the best thing to do to keep yourself safe, to
Mm.
have the appropriate response. But I mean, things like that are often you're in shock, you're shocked, and you don't know
Yeah.
how to
Mm.
respond. So you're thinking about that as well.
I think when he did that, I wanted to get away, and then I wanted to see him again because I was sexually attracted to him. And then I asked my friend, I said, "Well, I'm going to invite him around my house, but we'll have a code, and if I ring you, call the police." I mean, it's crazy now when I think back to
Yeah.
wanting to see him so much that I had a code with a friend to call the bloody police. I mean, that's just mad.
Yeah, but that just shows your emotional state at the time.
Hmm.
That's the way your emotions were operating.
What, that
So,
it didn't really matter that he might have punched me again?
um, that your emotional needs were overtaking your need for safety,
Oh, I see.
and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
able to put yourself in that position.
Yeah.
So, a criticism, that isn't me judging you. It's just that,
No,
I
I
mean,
don't. No, no, no. I
people
know you're
do
not.
that kind of thing. I mean, they do that kind of thing. So you were looking for some love and affection, and
Yeah,
it, like he was the candidate that was going to give you what you needed.
yeah,
So you're willing to risk it.
yeah.
But I don't know, weird things go on. I mean, when I was younger, and I was living in London, um, so when I was in my early 20s, I was a socialist, vegetarian, feminist, left wing, hothead, and the men I attracted were all right wing military types who were pro nuclear, and I was anti nuclear. What was that all about? They
Mm.
just kept coming into my life, kept getting attracted to me, and I was thinking, what's going on? God, why are you sending me these people? Because and when you're in your 20s, you think you know everything, and you
Mm.
know you will save the world, kind of thing. But I just kept coming across these guys, Sloan Rangers, upper class men, military men, Sandringham. I was thinking, this is just really weird. And I was got a Greenham Common and stuff, and so all kinds of things. Really radical. I was involved in radical politics in London in lots of different ways, but I kept coming across these men. So sometimes there's weird things that go on, I think, with who you attract romantically into your life. I don't know how it works, why it works, but it just does.
Hmm. Sexual attraction is weird as well, isn't it? I'm either like super, super, super attracted or just not attracted. And often wish I was like one of these women that sort of fancied everything in trousers, because it must be so much easier.
Mm. Um, oh, I couldn't say, dear. I'm not one of those.
But
I'm
it
quite
must.
picky.
Sometimes I think like, yeah, sometimes I think that's, I know you're not like it, but some, I know I have friends who are like it, and I think I wish I was like them, where that'll do and that'll do. I mean, for me, I can go like such a long time before I see somebody that I really like, and then it's a bit overboard, a bit sort of too much.
I don't know. The last time somebody wolf whistled at me was in a bloody men's prison, so it didn't really count. By the captive audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Reasons why I was in a men's prison, by the way, before there's any speculation. And no, I'm not a trans.
what was that person? That book sounds good. What was it called?
What book was that?
The one that the probation officer wrote.
I think it's the Freedom Programme. There's the Freedom Programme, Power to Change, and Recovery Toolbox. Hang on, I'll see if it's. I think I've got it on the bookshelf. I'll see if I can find it. But yeah, she was 10 years experience. She knows pretty much what she's talking about. You get it for free anyway. Oh, here it is. Yeah, Living with the Dominator, it's called.
Living with who?
Living with the Dominator. A book about the Freedom Programme, and it's by Pat Craven.
Oh, right.
And it's got a cartoon on the front of it with a woman sat on a chair and a man kneeling down in front of her, and he's saying, "Marry me for better or worse," and the woman is thinking, "How worse?"
I do that sometimes when I, meet someone. I think, oh, when's the punching gonna start? It's just, yeah, when you're hiding the sort of monster type, it's horrible. It's sort of, oh, I don't. And then they say some women bring that out in men, and then the men are sort of eager
Oh,
to say, "Oh, you brought that out in me. I was never angry with anyone else."
right. So these are the different kinds. I'll just read a couple out. So these are different kinds of abusers. So, for example, there's the persuader. The persuader threatens to hurt or kill you and the children, cries, says he loves you, threatens to kill himself, threatens to report you to social services, benefits agency. There is the head worker, puts you down, tells you you're too fat, too thin, ugly, stupid, useless.
That's Paul. He's like that.
Right. Then there's the bad father. Says you are a bad mother, turns the children against you, uses access to harass you. That stuff that goes on with women and kids is awful. The shit men pull on women, I've seen it quite a few times now. So when you away from them, when you split up from them, the abuse doesn't stop. They carry on trying to abuse you. Threatens to take the children away, persuades you to have his baby, and then refuses to help you care for the baby. So that's. But you also learn about what is healthy. What is a healthy person to have a relationship with?
Sure.
So, for example, there's the lover. Shows you physical affection without assuming it will lead to sex, accepts your right to say no to sex, shares responsibility for contraception. The liberator welcomes your friends and family, encourages you to have outside interests, encourages you to develop your skills at work and college. So it shows you that that there is behaviours that are appropriate, and that's what you should be looking for. So yeah, it's kind of guides you through how to get recover or get out, either recover from being in an abusive relationship or get out. So
Right.
yeah, so it's a really good book to get, and it's very helpful. And considering 2 women a week are killed by the partners, this can be the difference between life or death for some women, and that's not a joke. Because what some women have to go through is just beyond belief. And society judges these women, yet if they knew what they had to put up with. But it's like it comes back to the same question: why do men behave like this? And in the course, it's a great course, but there's a bit of an 80s feminist explanation for why men are like this. It's like it's stuck in the, like I was saying, I was, when I was in my early 20s, feminist and all that. And it's like that hasn't changed, that thinking. And I'm thinking, well, now, come on. There's a bit more to this now. Why men behave the way they do. And I'm not generalising men anywhere that are listening or judging you. But, and it was kind of just the explanation is that men are brought up with these beliefs. So they just go around being like this and blah, blah, blah. I think, well, I'm sorry, but that's too simplistic. It really is. I mean, there's a lot more to why people behave the way they do. All right, I think, men and women are different. They have they're just wired different, aren't they? The program different. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, they are. It's odd. I mean, is all this abuse going on behind closed doors, or is, I mean, I've definitely felt a lot of it, but I mean, I look around and I do see people having happy marriages. I mean, they do. I don't really get it. Pardon?
Yeah, absolutely. People are in happy relationship. I'm not. Yeah, totally.
And I think if you have a bad relationship, it affects everything. I mean, I'm not in a good position financially, and I think if I'd have been partnered up, first of all, you'd make better decisions because it's two of you. Secondly, life's easier. It's less expensive, certainly for housing and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's difficult. I mean, but I do think it does go back to your fathers, because a little girl adores daddy, and I know I did, and he was, he was bad. He was a bad man, actually. And I think I've never really let go of him. I just think I look for him all the time and look for it to be good this time, or look to maybe have the control over him or something, to make it okay. And I just pick men that are really like him, and it's just really sad. I mean, Paul, he's Irish. I mean, and he's like my dad in similar
Hi there,
ways,
everybody.
like
Just
not
making a
really
new video because I
working,
haven't in a long
drinking
time,
beer.
and I wanted
If
to
he does
respond
work,
to
he'll be
the Brian
aggressive
Harvey interview.
to
No, it wasn't
somebody,
really. It was
and then
kind of
lose
like a
the
vlog
job.
he
My
was
father was like
doing,
that.
the
He was
vlog,
always punching
which
other
I'm doing
men.
now,
Like
and I've
when we were
never done
flying
it
back
before
from
because I've
Dublin one
always had
time, he
a radio
punched
show.
one
He
of
said
the
to me,
air,
the
people
I
that let you on the
speak to
plane.
Palladians. No,
I
that's
mean, we'd been
complete
waiting there standby
BS.
for hours.
I don't make videos
He's
about
gone up to
people,
him
and I
and
don't speak to
punched him, and
Palladians.
then
So
we
there
all
we are.
had to,
I was the
after
one that
sleeping in the
broke
airport for
the
days,
story
we had
about
to then
the
get the boat and the train.
Red
I felt
Rooms,
so
and
sick. But that kind of,
ironically,
and Paul
my
has that, and he has that
producer
with me as well,
put
that kind of
a
fly off the handle. And I think the reason why I was
Tommy
having a go at him
Robinson
about
picture of
that
him
girl
at
is
the
because
front of it,
I thought, well, when I
and
meet up with
from
him
then
next,
on
he's going
in,
to like
Free
be
Tommy
talking
Robinson
about her,
picked
going
up the
on about her. Oh,
video,
she's so
and then
beautiful,
from
she's
then
so
on in,
nice.
lots of people
And my
saw it, and then
experience
Red
of
Pill
her, knowing
Phil
of her, I
did a
felt a bit offended.
interview with
She
Brian.
blocked
So
me. I tried to
actually,
help her
Brian, it
out.
would have
So I
been
don't want to
better
talk
if
about
you'd have
someone
said,
like
thank
that.
you
But
so much,
when I would
Christine,
meet up
and
with
thank you
him
so much for your
next,
producer
he would
for
make me
putting
talk
me
about
out
her.
there and
And,
getting my story
I was trying to make it clear
told.
that
And then
I didn't
second
want
in
to
line, Red
hear
Pill Phil would have
about
come
that
in. But no,
person. And then I
instead
get
of
all
that,
that abuse
Brian,
that I'm
even
a
though I thought we
lesbian
were
and
friends
that,
and we
oh, you're a
chatted
lesbian.
for hour
Oh,
upon
normal
hour
women
upon
don't get
hour,
hurt that
and
much
I
by
even
women.
woke
I'm
up
not
sometimes
actually,
when I
I'm
was
not
due to
hurt
do the
by her,
school
for
run
God's
next
sake.
day. I
So I don't
woke
want
up
to
and I
sort
would
of hear
listen to
about her
you
the whole
for
time.
hour
And I
upon
think it's
hour
because
and counsel
actually
you and
any other
try and
normal person
make
you
sure
say,
you were
oh, I don't want to really
okay.
talk about him after
And
about 5 minutes.
then
But
all I got
with Paul,
from
he
you was
will
to
lose his
turn on the
temper.
thing, and
So
you
if
said,
I'm in a
thank you, Red
car
Pill Phil.
with
No, actually,
him
it was
and he
me,
starts
okay?
talking about
And
her
it
and
was
I sort of
actually, it
look away
me.
or say,
It
well, I
was
don't
my
really want
producer
to talk
who
about
put
that person,
Tommy
he will then get
Robinson
very
on the cover,
violently
and then it was
angry with
picked up
me.
by Free
And then I'll
Tommy
be sitting
Robinson.
there
So actually,
shitting
thanks to
myself.
them, and I don't
So,
think any of
you
them
know,
got a
it's the
mention
whole
either.
scenario
And then you
is
said
a
you didn't
little
want
bit
to be
like me,
involved with
you
me
know, wanting
because
to
I
see that
speak
guy and saying
to
to my friend, I've
Palladians.
got a code
No, actually,
and
I
I'll
don't
call the
speak to
police. It's the
Palladians. I don't even
same
believe
type
in
of
the
man, you know,
existence of
sitting in a
Palladians, so why
car,
would I speak to
afraid he
them?
might
No,
punch me
all wrong.
in my flat,
Right,
afraid
now what I'm going
that
to
my
do is read out my
boyfriend might
blog,
go
since
crazy
everything seems to have got a
and
little bit
punch me.
confused about who
It's the
I
same
am
kind of
in this
thing, really, isn't
scenario.
it?
I'm not sure whether anybody
Yeah,
gives a
yeah.
damn, but there's an
So
X
you
button
have
there which you
to
can press if you're not
ask yourself,
interested. If you are interested, I'm going to
what do
read
I really want to
out
put myself
my
in this
blog, and this
situation?
is my story.
And it's hard
Currently, at the
to
moment, in
assert
the High
yourself
Courts
to
of
people like
Justice,
that
there's
because of the
a
reaction that you're
court
going
case
to get.
going on, and the court case
Thinking
is
you might
Sir
potentially
Elton John versus me,
so
basically. There are a
we've
few
just got to
people
decide
standing in
what is
between of that,
acceptable and
like a
what's
newspaper,
unacceptable
but they are
that you've got to
fighting
do
me,
with
and they
the
are
person that you have a
trying
relationship
to
with.
say that
Yeah,
I
And
did
you're
things
right.
that
You
I didn't
you
actually
can't
do.
assert yourself
Since
with
I'm
them. Yeah,
no,
standing
you
between
can't. It's
them
too risky.
and
If
it's too
that's
millions,
risky.
unacceptable, to
and
make
they
another
have already
person feel
burgled
like
me,
that is
my life
unacceptable,
is
to make another
actually in
person feel
danger. It's
afraid that
not
they're
that
going to be
I've been
physically
saying
assaulted
it on YouTube
if
all the
if
time, so
you
the
do
police come
something,
round and they're like, oh, everyone's
if
saying
they
your
do
life's in
something that you
danger, are
don't
you
like,
okay? No, my life
that's
actually is
unacceptable.
in danger
And
because
also,
I am
it's
a
criminal.
threat to people.
Somebody
Right,
hits
here's
you,
my
that's a
blog,
criminal
Creatures of
offence.
the Light. So nobody thinks
So,
that I
and if
chat to
somebody threatens
Palladians.
to hurt you, that's a criminal offence.
It's called,
So,
I've said that, it's called Creatures of the
really,
Light. Time is all we
you
really
know,
have of true value.
it's up
That
to
is
you to
why the
decide
rich and
if
powerful
it's
use
worth
us
being
little
in the having
people
a
to do
friendship
the
with this
meaningless,
person,
repetitive
particularly
tasks
if they're going to
until
get
all our precious
abusive.
time has been
If you
wasted
say
on
something that they
parasites
don't
who
like, I
somehow
mean, it's
hold all
possible
the
to
power.
have
From the
somebody to
get-go, my
disagree with
time was
you or
stolen
not
by
like
them. Time is
something
the
and
lifeblood of
convey
our
that to you
lives.
without you
Kate
getting
Spade,
abusive in
Robin
return.
Williams have all been murdered by
Yeah, I
them.
mean,
To stop these
this
people
is
from
beginning to
revealing
sound
their
like a
evil
personality
deeds.
disorder, to be quite
I
honest.
had my own life
Oh,
ruined by
what, of
mainstream media
mine?
when they
Personality
called me the devil's
disorder,
daughter.
yeah,
Or then
yeah.
that I joined the
Really?
very people who had
Well,
destroyed
yeah.
me, mainstream media.
There's
I
no.
wondered
This sounds
about
like
this
there's
until I
lacking in
found out the truth
control,
about my life by an
getting
American
violent
called
very
Anna.
quickly.
More about that
Oh,
later.
you
That's
mean
what helps.
Paul has a
It's
personality
August
disorder?
Yeah,
2018 and
yeah.
ongoing in the High Courts of
So
Justice,
that's what
London. Hollywood's favourite
yeah,
London barrister, David
and
Sherborne,
you
is
have a
demanding millions from
responsibility
my
not to
old
put yourself in
employer,
a
The
dangerous
Sun,
situation
at
where
my
you're going to get
expense
assaulted,
for
and
payouts to Sir
especially
Elton
in
John,
something in a
Hugh
closed
Grant, and
space like a
99
car or
others,
something like that.
including Heather Mills,
So
Lily
yeah,
Allen, and
think
Liz
very
Hurley,
carefully
whom
about
he
it.
feels
That's
I've
what I
spied
think.
on for over
But you're
2
right. I
decades
mean,
whilst
there's.
working as an investigative
I'm not
journalist
saying
for the
that
News of the World, The
all men are
Sun, and
like
the
this at
Daily
all
Mail.
because I know they're not. Um,
Sherborne has called me a
it's
spy
just
and
a
a data
strange
thief, but
situation,
the
like you say,
reality
when
is
you've had
I've
this
never been
blueprint of
arrested
your
or
father
even
being a
questioned
certain
for
way,
what the
and
Hollywood
that's
elite state
imprinted
as
on you,
fact
and
about me
it
through
will
David
just
Sherborne,
going,
Hugh
when
Grant's
you become a
barrister.
woman, it's still
When I
there,
rang
and
his
it's like
offices, he
boys
told
and
me
their
through his
mums,
assistant
men
Andrew,
and their
it's
mums.
nothing personal. Sadly,
So it
David,
is
I
an
support
imprint on us,
myself and my child without any
but
assistance, so I cannot afford for
I
you to
don't know.
shout
You
in
just have
public
to
that
think
I am a thief,
what you
just so
want
you
from a
and your
healthy
chums can get
relationship
a
and what you
payoff.
would count a healthy
They feed off
relationship.
us, you see, we creatures of the
Mm.
light, and
But it's
they
not
Maybe
are
it's a
JamesCasbolt. I
question of
don't
vampiric,
just
think that.
unable to
maybe
create
it's a
or to
question of just
really
letting
love.
go of.
The fact
I
is,
don't know.
I
I
was a
think
star
it's
witness
harder as well
Operation
if you've been
Meeting
sexually
against the
abused by
criminality
your
of
father,
phone
because I
hacking
think
at news
I
and
don't know
TV.
that there must be all that mixed in.
One
Not
of his
only is
claims
it
is
oh
that
my
while
heart
working on
belongs to
Fleet Street as an
daddy and all
investigative
that.
journalist
It's
and close confidant of Rebecca
sort of like
Brooks, I pretended to be a
sexuality's been
psychiatrist and
taken by
posttext
them, isn't it?
calls
Or
to the
they've
Priory to find out all the
encouraged
intimate secrets of
you,
the rich
because
and
normally isn't
famous.
it that
The director
girls
of the
get that
Priory, Dr. Mark
Oedipal
Collins, also my
complex and
hypnotherapist for
then
many years, tells
they
me
sort of
no such
daddy
calls were made,
rejects
and if they
them and
ever
then
were,
they go
the strict
healthily and get, I
security is
mean,
that such
if you've got a
pretend
sexually abusive
doctors, if they
father,
ever
they don't
existed,
push you
would
away.
always be
So
made to put
in a
any
way,
requests for
you end up
information
having
in
that
writing.
hidden
the Hollywood elite
relationship
line.
with them
But
in a
this
way,
is
kind
not
of
about
thing.
money. This
You
is
know?
about the work I've been doing
Oh,
on my
wow,
radio
okay.
show. Now
Maybe.
it's
I
ceased.
don't know.
Wonder upon
It's
wonders.
weird.
Exposing
God, I
pedophiles
wish
in
I could
Hollywood
afford a
and the murder of
psychiatrist.
celebrities set to reveal child sex trafficking and all the other dirt they get tucked
Oh
to
my
illicit
God, we could all
rituals
do the
in the dark.
psychiatrist, I think.
It's so
The reality
unfair
is that
that they're
victimhood
just
is
so
something they
expensive.
know
Well,
very
mind
little
you,
about.
you
The
know, I
current
went to see
status of this
so many
world is
therapists.
that
I've
it
had
is
therapy since
owned
I was
by
25,
these
and
vampiric
to
controllers
still
who
be
feed off the rest of
attracted
us because
to,
we are
you know,
of the
men that are
light.
like that.
They
It's
are
a pretty
moths
poor
to
show,
our
really,
flames, that they seek
to
to
save
devour.
for all of them. I think so.
My life has been that of a squished,
I had a
piece
friend
of
who said that
light.
to me once.
The press
They
didn't
said,
just leak a
really?
few bits of
And you've
lines
had
about me.
therapy for
They
so
labelled
long,
me the
and it's
devil's
really
daughter
not done.
when
I
I
mean,
was
it has done me a
23
bit of
years of
good, but
age, all
not
over the
in the
TV,
way
on
you'd
the
think
front
it would be a
pages of
pretty
a
simple
national
thing
newspaper.
to cure that kind of thing. But I
I'm
don't know,
going to
maybe
pose
it's
the theory that
incurable.
there is
Maybe
an
that's
us
it.
and a
Maybe it
them
is an
sharing this
incurable
planet, and
thing.
sometimes people's
Yeah, but when
lives
you think
can be
about it,
affected negatively
think
from the
about the worlds
get-go
that
by the
you've moved
vampires
in and the
ruling
circles that
this
you've moved
planet.
in. They're not,
I'd like to
some of
share my
them
own
aren't exactly
experience. I was dumped at the
prime
gates of
examples of good
the
men, are
Roman
they?
Catholic Church,
I
never to
mean,
fend
you
for
know,
myself
the
as a
world of
blonde, blue-eyed
journalism,
girl.
serial killers,
I was sexually
terrorists. I mean,
abused. This
you're not
is
going
in
to
my
find
book,
Mr. Right there, are you?
Searching for Daddy.
You know?
No, and
Lifelong
especially the world of
PTSD from the
newspapers,
large
they were the
amounts of sexual
worst.
abuse
They were
Yeah.
far
I
better. They were
tolerated.
far worse than the terrorists,
I was a good
actually.
investigative journalist exposing priests in the
Yeah,
Catholic
But
yeah,
then
Church
again,
and
the
probably
other
guy
was.
who punched
paedophiles.
me on the
I
leg was a,
I fought against bullying
divorcee,
on
and
GMTV,
he was
fighting
like
for
an
the working
office
classes
worker
over school bullying,
loved by the
been ignored in
village.
schools
So,
to the
I
detriment of the
mean, I don't
children.
know, it's weird, isn't
I
it?
was to
That's
be
what I thought. Oh,
escorted
he's a
to the
good man.
courthouse
He
for
wears a
operational
suit,
meeting, and
and then
Detective
that
Michael White,
happened.
who was my
That really
minder,
shocked me actually
stand
when it
up to
did
my
happen. I
contemporary News
thought it was just
International
so out of the blue,
anti-criminality
and it was like a really
of
hard
the
punch on
phone
my
hacking.
leg, and then
I
he
was a star
skidded
witness
off,
against the
and I remember
editor
I
of
went
News of the World phone
completely
hacker Greg
numb.
Miskew.
Yeah, that's shock.
Greg,
Yeah,
after coming
and
out of prison
trauma.
for phone hacking,
Yeah,
went on to the
well,
hacked off
so
payroll. The fact
I
is, Hugh Grant's
suppose
hacked
one
off
thing to
are a
think
highly
about is
ruthless, organised
where you're going to
mafia
find
who don't
like more
care about
healthier
employing
relationships,
Greg
where
Miskew
you're
or
going to
bearing
meet
more care
people
after
that
they
would
come
be
out of
less
prison.
prone
They aren't
to doing
against
things
hacking,
like
they
that.
just want to own the hackers
Um,
for themselves. The
I
truth
don't
is that
know.
Hollywood are
Nor
committed
do
to
I.
ending free
No.
speech and use the ruse of pampered celebrities wanting their privacy to push this sinister
Oh
agenda
God,
Oh
I
my
think
of
God.
we're
ending
gonna
any kind of
come to the end of the
investigations
show
in
in a
the
minute.
media. They
Well, I
have
hope some
control
women
of
listening
Facebook, of
have
YouTube,
got
so
some
it isn't
help
an
from it. I mean, I'd
option
love to
to
put
use
this
this
show
as
on
an avenue
YouTube.
either.
If there's
Try
anyone
to
out there who
criticise
knows
this
how
elite
to
and
do
see
it
how
and
your
is
channel is
listening and
removed in
could give
seconds.
me a
This will
hand
get
to
worse
put
if
it on
hacked off
YouTube,
have
I
their
mean, it
way.
might help some
Hollywood
women
mafia
as
are
well
not
listening
on
to our
side with us.
conversation. It'd be
I've
good
been
to if I
revealing
could
the
split the
hundreds of
show in
murders of
little
children and
in two
activities of
halves.
elite
You know, the
paedophiles
first half
in
and
nightclubs
second
over
half. I
many
mean,
years and other celebrity high
you know,
places
I mean, I'd
to the
like
public,
to
and
listen
sometimes
to
stuff
what
that
we've
wasn't
just been saying.
published.
Sometimes you go out there and look on
I've long
YouTube and
fought a
there's people
corrupt media. I
lecturing
came
about
forward to
narcissists,
Levinson while I
but
was
it's
helping
not,
Davis
I don't
research
know,
his
it doesn't
book
really
Hack
help
Attack,
me either,
and
you
yet no
know.
one was interested.
No, it's a bit
Given
like
Ugh.
a
how
hot
Fleet Street
topic,
used
hasn't
serving
it?
SAS,
It's a
and nobody
massive
asked
hot
me,
topic because, yeah, it
and the
is.
fact they had asked me to
It's
spy
like
on people
there's
at the
a
Priory
virus of
when I was a
narcissists everywhere.
patient there
So yeah,
getting
that's hard enough to say.
hypnotherapy. It was only after Hugh Grant
Yeah,
read
yeah.
my memoir
Well,
did he
well, I've
approach me,
recorded
and
this
then he paid
anyway,
for
so
me
I'll
to
send
go
it
and
you,
live
Oh,
and
in
thank
an
you.
you
If
isolated
you
can
can
just
send
house
it
in
as
upload
an
it.
Windsor.
MP,
This is
you
who
can send
Mr.
it as an
Graham Johnson
MP3. I
of
mean, that'll
Hacked
be
Off.
good. Then I'll try and get somebody
Yes, it was
to
finery.
to
Yes, it had
to
a
to,
boat.
to hang
But
it.
while I
That'll
was
be
living
excellent.
there
What
all
was the name
alone
of
with my
that book
little boy,
again? I'll
we
just
were
write it down.
subjected to a midnight raid
Okay,
and
it's
burglary.
called
While my son was
Living with the
recovering, I was
Dominator.
threatened by Hacked Off frontman Graham Johnson
Okay,
that he would come and kick my
living
door down if I didn't
with
meet him with some
the
Daily Mail remittances so he could
dominant. Yeah,
finish Paul
And it's by
Dacre. That's a
Pat
quote.
Craven.
Luckily, someone rather important was
right.
in the car to
Craven,
witness this, and it was duly
Craven,
reported to the
Mm-hmm.
CID,
and she
who
was
were
a probation
investigating my
officer,
break-in and were
Right.
well aware
working
of
with
what was happening.
perpetrators. And it's a book about the Freedom Programme,
They were very eager to get the
What's the
which
paperwork
Freedom
I had in my
Program?
the
possession
Freedom
because to
Programme
them
is a
they
domestic
felt
violence
it stood for
recovery
millions
course
for these
that you can
celebrities.
go on that should be
They
run
offered me
by
£25,000 to hand over these
local
remittance advices from the Daily
women's
Mail.
refugees
I refused,
and domestic
so they
violence
broke in and
support.
took them.
You might be able to
A
find
TV
it
company
through
has
Victim
tape
Support
recording and
because
all
they
the
have quite a
emails.
good
So even if
domestic
I'm
violence
bumped
support
off, they will
service
reveal
now.
that the CID said
So
indeed it was
wherever your
professional
area is,
burglary.
if you're in the
The
UK, there should
TV
be
company
somebody
also has
who
the
is
documents
running the
where they
course.
offered me
And then
25k.
there's
In the Guardian
Freedom
Davis'
Program.
book.
Then after
I
that, you do
helped him.
Power
He
to
called me
Change,
York and listed
and then
me in
this
the back
Recovery
as one
Toolbox
of the
is the
investigators who
final and
carried
third
out
one.
HUMINT.
Oh, I'd
And
love
then
to
you
do that. Have
Is
you done
human
that?
intelligence.
I'm just coming to the end of Power to Change.
Yet Hacktoff told me I have
And
to
then
prove
I'll
my
have to do
innocence rather
Recovery
than they have to
Toolbox.
prove that I am a
So,
hacker.
Wow.
The banal truth is, I
yeah,
can barely
I'd
turn
love to
on a
do it. Is it
computer,
good? Does it
let
help?
alone use a laptop
yeah,
to hack other
very
people.
much so.
Nor am I
And
data
the other
thief,
thing
having
is,
been a PI
you
since
meet
age
women who've
16.
been through the
I know
same
that
thing,
data theft is
and you can
illegal.
compare notes, and some of the stories are just off the
There is an
charts.
us and a
I
Really?
them.
mean,
One
Oh
feeds
yeah,
off the other.
yeah.
I will
I
call the
mean,
feeders vampires
really,
because they
really,
have a
some of
hive
the
mind
ex-
and they have no
things that
God.
women have done to
The
them
bottom
is
line
just.
is they are
I don't mean
evil,
horrible things. I
devoted to
mean just
money,
like,
embarrassingly enamored
oh,
by
really
celebrity,
bizarre
and
things
devoted to
like
lifestyle
controlling
materialism.
things like
They don't care about love or
making
God.
sure that deliveries are coming on a
For
certain
those who
day,
wish
so the
to
woman has
hear
to stay in
more,
and wait,
this is my life story. My
for
life began
deliveries
the
and
Crusades of Rescue Kids Home in
just all
London.
kinds of
The other kids became my close family.
weird
A student
things.
came to study the
But they're all
emotionally deprived
mechanisms of
kids
control,
at my kids'
basically.
home who turned out to be
But
militarily
it kind
connected
of
through
does
his
put you off
father.
men a little bit. I've
When I
got to be
turned
honest.
16, I felt
When
as
you
if my
meet young
feelings were
women and
dead.
like, they're
I
talking
felt
about
trapped
things, the
inside a
shit that's
prison
gone
of
down,
bliss where
and you
others
think, oh
couldn't
my
reach me.
god.
Yet I was an open house
But
with no
it
boundaries
does
and
make
anybody could
it
use me.
helps you
I
immensely
had
because
PTSD.
it makes you
When
feel
he
less
went back
alone because
abroad at
this
18, I
kind of
went to live in
experience,
a
like any
homeless
kind of trauma,
hostel.
can make you
I had no
feel
idea how to support
isolated, and you're
myself.
not.
Yes.
I had
Just
no
loads of people gone
Yes.
through
education.
it.
I was scared
Yeah,
to
The other
because
become
you
thing
think.
is,
prostitute like some of the
Sorry.
other girls in
some people
care,
have had the
like
same
Kerry who would
experiences
slash
as you,
tourists. So I
uh,
vowed I'd do
exactly
anything
the
but
same.
ending up
So
like
that makes you
Kerry.
feel better.
Some part of me feared I'd end up a
Um,
whore or suiciding.
and
Nobody cared
you
about
just
me
have
and
like
I
a
didn't know
sense of
love.
camaraderie, and it
When
just
you
gives
live
you
a life
strength.
where no one
So,
cares and no one ever
and then
cared,
through
you
the
often
course,
think
you
of
learn
leaving
how to
this
handle
world
your
via
shit
suicide.
basically, and
I
move
tried to kill
forward, and
myself over
it's
10
positive
times.
and more
I've
healthier.
had 3
Not
serious
saying that you
stomach
won't make
lumps from my
mistakes.
time in
You know,
care.
it's not like
And
that, but
after,
you're in
where
a
the
lot
boys
better
were raped
position
by
than
the
you were
social
before.
workers and
I'd
risked
love to do
turning
that,
them
even
so
with
much,
women.
the
I'm
beige
not
clump in the
assertive, and then
corridor
I
was
end up having
stained red.
arguments with them because I
I
haven't been
joined men
assertive.
who were ex-MI5,
I mean, it's
ex-military, and
like
a firm who
I just
needed
like to
young
be
girls to do
assertive
surveillance and office
and
work.
not
It was
angry.
just easy
Like when
work for
someone does something to
nobodies.
piss you off,
I
just
became a
say
private
something, but
detective,
without being
but really
angry.
I
I
was a
think
schmuck
sometimes,
used for getting
you
close
feel
to
like, oh, I
men.
can't be
It was
assertive, so I'll
dangerous,
be
and
angry.
it
But
got me down.
angry loses
Nothing
relationships.
glamorous
Yeah,
about it,
well, you
nothing
learn
special about
assertiveness
it.
on the
There are
Power
so
to
many
Change
of these
course,
agencies
and
through
you learn
London,
how to
throughout
do
the
things
UK
like that.
and America. In the
So,
small, close-knit world of
yeah.
ex-spooks, I was in awe of an ex-public
So
school boy called
assertiveness,
John
yeah,
Boyle.
just having
He looked like
assertiveness
Dirk
training does
Bogarde,
help
his
you
air of
immensely.
mystery and
Deal
unreachability.
with a lot of
I'd heard a
things.
lot of things about him.
So
None of
yeah.
these things matched with the John Boyle
I'd
I
love
Um,
knew,
that.
who looked
Well,
so
it's been a
alike
great
to
show,
delicate
hasn't it?
and
I've really enjoyed
genteel
myself. I
Bogarde.
think we had, two powerful
The
hours,
agency
and
taught me how to
I'd like
trust
to
missing people
divide
and
them
use a
into
car to
half
tie
and
the
hang
knot.
them.
At the
So if
home,
there's
I
anybody out
discovered
there
I'd
listening
been
that can
called the
help,
Irish Crusaders. I knew
please
things
do
others
help. And
didn't, and
thanks
it
for
gave
listening.
me a
And thanks,
feeling for what
Jana,
other people
for being a
felt.
fantastic
It
guest.
pleasure,
made me a
And
very
when
pleasure.
I
angry
do
detective.
get it on the
I
show,
was
I'll link
pleased
down
I was
below where
actually
people can
talented
get in
at some
contact with
point.
you.
Mostly, I found
Okay.
answers
All right then.
how
Good
to
night,
solve
everyone.
problems, sleeping on the
Good
problem,
night, everyone.
and other
Thank
ways
you
to
for listening.
survive. I
Stop
assumed I
there.
had a deeper self who was cleverer than I was because the outer me was a bit of an idiot. Maybe I was a bit of a autistic type of a kid. I know I made bad eye contact. I was impractical and easily led. My life was empty because my relationships often failed. I'd give too much, then feel bad and confuse others by being cross. I was oversensitive to rejection. I stomached loneliness and grew used to it. The vile job fitted a loner always undercover using another name, Janie or Rachel or Mary. I didn't feel it was fair the way adopted kids were labelled. My adopted mother said it's because we were born out of wedlock. The family was strict Irish Catholics and my dad's sister was a nun. I found a book in my adopted mother's drawer. The book was all about the Moors murderer, serial killer Ian Brady, and I felt intrigued why an adopted young man of 25 would rape and murder. I don't know why I wrote to him. I knew if I did try to hurt my abusive father, he wouldn't lose no sleep in beating me up. Maybe Brady was my caged punchback, or maybe I wanted to prove that adopted kids weren't really evil, that something had happened to make them like they were. Was I angry? Yeah, I seethed with hatred towards a world that had left me out of it. My parents were outwardly respectable and loved by everybody. They even boasted how much God loved them. So I felt on my own. I didn't even have a God. I scrutinised Brady's crimes. Like me, he had an adoption that failed, and he was in pain over being called a bastard. I began to think that unlike my sexually abusive father, Brady was somehow innocent. I don't know why. Something in his eyes, in the photograph. A cop investigating the case asked around about black magic, and others sneered at him for it. I wondered if something dark and hidden had gone on. I sensed it somehow. My adoptive aunt, the nun, Sister Kathleen Hart of the Daughters of St. Paul, taught me how to follow the waxing and waning of the moon. I studied theosophy. and I found out I was powerfully gifted with prophecy. In another time, Sister Kathleen Hart, the daughter of St. Paul, would have been burned at the stake. Desperate for answers to the meaning of life, I wrote and visited serial murderer Ian Brady when I was just 21 to try and find out why children like us were evil. They weren't, of course. I'd just been told that by my adoptive mother, who beat me bloody. On the third visit to the Liverpool-based hospital, Brady was full of drugs and he sat alone with me. The psychiatrist had deemed all his social visits be unsupervised. I was a really stupid girl, out of my depth. Hawk-eyed Brady lunged at me, his recent medication giving him the courage to flick his tongue greedily around my little mouth. Staggering out of there in agony, my mouth covered in his filthy gob, I felt like my little body held all the energy of his heinous crimes. I felt like his crimes, like demons, sat inside, like dirty spit inside my gut. I wanted to die. I felt invaded by something. I saw visions of bloody, violent, terrifying crimes, and I knew something had entered inside me. I prayed and prayed to get it out of me, whatever it was. It felt like it was alive. I read about walk-ins and I wondered, was I one? I felt stronger after reading a book called Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us. I prayed that I'd be freed and let a higher being take over my body. I wanted out. I wanted to die. Things began to get better, and I don't know why. I almost felt like I was a different person to the one I had been up to that time. I noted on the visits each personality of Ian Brady was different. One was intellectual, one a child, one a teenager. His fourth personality felt pure evil. I called the fourth man, the torturer I found inside him, Nazi Doctor. I felt his dark, powerful energy as being something entirely different from Brady, who was weak, effeminate, little muppet, full of ego and a vile pseudo-intellectualism, only fooling other people like Alan Kiley, who looked up to the weak child killer. But it didn't fool me. I also decided that enough was enough. Investigating why Ian Brady killed was beyond me, so I put it all behind me. Unknown to me, lurking in the background, a Fleet Street journalist of some fame called Philip Hall hung around outside my digs in London, watching me like a detective. I blushed as this classy, handsome stranger charmed me with his education and good manners. Phil promised as a big-shot journalist that he could put my name in lights and make me famous by calling me the new Marilyn Monroe. Seemed to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never knowing who to ring to when the rain came in. Would have liked to know you, but I was just a kid. Your candle burned out long before your legend ever did. I think every young blonde fancied themselves some Marilyn Monroe, and I was no exception. Phil Hall, who was a senior crime reporter for the Sunday People, told me that he was captivated by the fact that a young beauty had visited such a beast. Phil was a well-known hack and had early grey hair and was softly spoken. I immediately felt attracted to him because he felt like a father figure. I couldn't act, I wasn't even an actress, yet I believed he would make me into Marilyn Monroe. I fantasised about everyone finding me worthwhile and loving me. We sat over a pint of lager in a nearby pub. I told him I'm an orphan, I haven't got a dad. Phil had been served up the details by a man called Alan Graham and Rachel, two scuzzy private eyes who had sold me to him for a deal with Philip's newspaper, the Sunday People, to do illegal data gathering. Dipshit private investigations work for stupid people. They had also gained a £5,000 for selling me. Phil said it meant there was nothing left to pay me for my story, so I'd just have to tell him my story for free. He paused. Didn't you think Ian Brady was your father? That's what Alan told us. I told him, yeah, they said my father was a criminal. Turned out he wasn't a criminal. My so-called real mother has said that he was a criminal because he was a lot older than her and she was 13. But back then, that was enough for him. A criminal's a criminal. Why not a serial killer? The Devil's Daughter was what they called me. They broadcasted my image across the front page of the national newspapers. The Sunday People, under the sad headline of the working class girl with her hair tongued, a golden dress and a bright red glossy lip, far too much eye makeup and dropped pearl earrings. I felt so sad and so ashamed of myself. Ian Brady's daughter, yet I was no such thing. Phil had no feeling for ruining my life. He told me how beautiful he thought I was, how much like Marilyn Monroe my life had been, how everyone would see me like Marilyn and love me. But I was to be smeared as the daughter of a piece of shit. I was to be vilified, not loved. He was lying. Smile for the camera, it's not the end of the world, the Sunday People photographer told me, but I feared that all around me flames were rising and I was going to be called Satan's daughter. The national press put me on TV advertising their newspaper about my visits to the grimy cell of Moore's murderer Ian Brady. They wrote that I claimed to be his long-lost daughter. Phil said it was better that he phrased it that I'd claimed it, then he wouldn't get his career ruined when they actually found out it wasn't true. He was over the moon when Ian Brady wrote a letter to him to say he remembered my mother Mary. He was lying, he just wanted to see me again. They dressed me in dark makeup, spiky high heels and the golden red dress I'd been wearing to fly up to Liverpool to go inside and ask the child killer Ian Brady, "Are you my dad?" I was on the pervert serial killer's visiting list, so I had access to go in on any visiting day I wanted. Of course I didn't ask him. I knew he'd lied. I sat opposite vile Ian Brady and wished the floor would open up and swallow me. The press were outside. A serial killer was in front of me. I had no choice. What way to turn? I felt like crying. I was in such a bad position. I dropped my cigarette on the floor and stressed out I swore, "Shit!" Brady nodded over at the guard, who this time sat at the far side of the room, and said, "Yeah, exactly. He is shit." So I told him what mess I was in. "Tell the press nothing," he ordered me dominatingly as Phil Hall waited outside in a car with a photographer. Phil wrote up the tale of a bad blood and orphanages and a monster cuddling a busty blonde, and he made me walk up and down outside the criminally insane asylum, up and down, until he got a good shot of me. When he finally did get the picture, he said, "Look at your eyes. They look so moody and stormy in it." I was just angry and tired and scared. I felt hunted. I read about it all on the front pages of the Sunday tabloid and felt that my life was over. Phil said to me, "It's odd how we have the power to ruin lives. It never ceases to surprise me. People always think you're his daughter now." While the second week's story was being prepared, Phil took us both on a ferry, headed for France. Then he hired a car. It was a soft top. We both drove across France, his white shirt billowing out the window. I kept looking at him. Looking back, I can see he was seducing me, the older man and the young idiot. Maxime de Winter and I was Joan Fontaine. But I was falling for him. The smell of him, who he was, so powerful. He'd just ruined my life, and yet there he was, not caring. Somehow I found it attractive. Phil drove for miles in the dusty heat of France. He drove us south until we reached picturesque Pont du Gard in the south of France. It's to hide you from the pack. The pack was the name they gave to the pack of hounds known as reporters on Fleet Street. Unpacked in our lovely rooms, we met outside, and we skinny dipped in the warm French Riviera underneath a magnificent stone bridge that looked almost Greek. It reflected into the water. It was such a beautiful place. Pont du Gard. It was like paradise. I was so glad to be away from the newspaper story that I was the devil's daughter in the UK. Suddenly, it was like I was in another universe, and there I was with this handsome man in his white shirts, and he was middle class, and I'd never been near a man like him. I was bowled over. He was a writer, and I was Marilyn Monroe. We stuffed oily snakes in garlic. We supped good old brandy on nights where the hum of crickets kept us awake past the small hours. I was stupidly falling in love with him. He knew how to follow the Michelin-starred restaurants all around Aigremont and Saint-Tropez. I saw him as too good for me because of his job, big shop journalist. I then knew it was what I wanted to be, a journalist. Phil was not that bright and silly, and I knew I was somehow smarter than him. If he can do this, why can't I reasoned. Strolling along the bridge, arm in arm in the hot sun, we sang songs and made each other laugh at old wooden tables outside little sun-drenched bistros, sucking with wet lips on fresh peaches pulled out of chilled glasses of Moscato as music played and we let our eyes dance the dance of love. Every morning over coffee, Phil Hall coached me how to locate stories in the newspaper to delight newspaper editors. He wanted me to join him in his profession. I sat there over my coffee that tasted gorgeous, nothing like the instant in the working class house I grew up in, beautiful brewed coffee, and I envisaged us as a married power couple, Posh and Becks, set writers, sought after by everyone, F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda. I gazed at him and I was falling in love. Well, he chewed on a cigarette and we chatted over the phone to Bridget Bardot. She agreed to meet us, but then she cancelled due to her dogs getting sick. Phil taught me how to put together a newspaper story over the beautiful fresh ground French coffee and crumbling fresh croissants. Our newly tanned bodies marbled by a brightening and waning yellow sun. There was a dog at the hotel. It scared me a bit, but he laughed. And I was happy. I was so happy in this other world, I never wanted to go home. On temperate evenings, as a dying marmalade light danced across the balcony, Phil taught me how to file copy to the news desk copy takers as our eyes danced away from each other's longing looks. We sipped champagne cur in the room as he taught me how to locate the breadcrumb in a story to follow up on and how to be a good journalist. I felt enthralled that Phil allowed me access to this higher world, one of the men in white shirts who held pens instead of hammers. Glossy skyscrapers in the midst of London full of history. Westminster and St. Paul's, Mayfair and Whitehall. I love this world, its lush, opulent vibe. I want to be part of it. I want to be part of a world of power, not living where I was living in a working class stew with people that never did anything. In France, I lazed about in a polka dot bikini beside my Hemingway in a mimosa-scented breeze on the riverbank on such hot sunny days, believing I'd joined this world of top newspapers and book writers in London. I began to think that Phil was my soulmate. I had once visited a renowned psychic called Mike Baker. He told me that a man with the initial J would impact on me so hard. J would beat down my walls and he would locate the real me and kiss me back to life. Since all Mike Baker had come true, like you'd leave your job, you'd go to a place that would look like Greece, you'd meet someone called P. Everything came true. So all this about meeting a soulmate called J, or the initial J, who would impact on my life like a star hitting Earth or an asteroid. Since all he said came true, I waited for this Jay. I imagined myself in a white seed pearl dress. I went to marry Jay, whoever he was. I knew he must be my twin soul. I imagined we would have great sex, and I'd enjoy it for once. I was a romantic. Phil laughed when I told him. And then he said, "Hey, my nickname at the Sunday People's offices is Jolly Phil Hall. I'm the J that the psychic told you about." I believed him. Jolly Phil Hall. It seemed to fit. He was impacting my life. During that very hot night, as crickets croaked and the heat made us sweat, we made love for the very first time in Pont du Gard. I prayed to God that he was J. I prayed to God that this was like a honeymoon. Phil's caresses on the high-count white cotton sheets in that beautiful hotel left me dead. I wondered what was going on. It was like I didn't want to be there all of a sudden. He was touching me. He was so handsome. He smelled so nice. He was my soulmate, Jay, and yet I didn't want to be there. Who would I fall in love with? Another deeper part of me felt revolted by him. It was like my stupid side had fallen for his power and his charm, and another side of me, a cleverer side, was cringing and saying, "Oh, he's disgusting. Get away from him." So we sailed back to London. And as London got nearer and nearer, I felt sicker and sicker and more sad. Phil was still my boyfriend, and he still wanted me to become a Fleet Street journalist. He took me out to Joe Allen and Bootleggers. In the celebrity haunt Bootleggers, page 3 girls dined alongside rich Arabs, and the champagne flowed. I got back to the cheap Bayswater hotel that Phil had put me in, and we danced around. I paraded around in my underwear playing Madonna's Get Into the Groove. Bah, you've got to prove your love to me. He slowed it down and we slow danced to On Days Like These by Matt Monro. We remembered France. We made love again. I hoped he was Jay, but I felt sick again. He stopped. "What's up? You act like you don't even like me, like you have to drink all that beer, that lager, and I don't get it. I thought you liked me." I'm sorry. You need to get drunk to sleep with me." "No, I don't need to get drunk. Just give me another sip of that lager." It was like my inner self that seemed to actively loathe him, and she came out when he tried to touch me. Afterwards, in Bootleggers over skinny fries, Phil felt guilty, he told me, that I hadn't been paid for being a world exclusive front page for 2 weeks running. So dinner's my treat. It was burger and fries. I only had a few £100 savings left in my bank account. I was by this time homeless, jobless, since the scandal had broken. "Don't worry, I'll teach you this business. You can work in Fleet Street," he promised me with a guilty grin. Hell, it never ceases to amaze me how he ruined lives. Look at the mess yours is in. You got no home, no job because of all this. Through his ongoing tuition, through his guilt, I actually became a bona fide journalist. With my full stripes, I bought a cheap one-way ticket to New York City, and like his baby bird leaving the nest, I rented a bedsit in a rough area of Brooklyn, New York City. I began to pound the streets of Manhattan, hunting news stories they'd enjoy back in the UK, like a bloodhound seeking a bone. I eagerly filed copy on stories from New York on Madonna's hair loss, called in the paper Madonna Loses Her Mane, and Howard's Beach racism from a cheap bedsit. Phil was shocked how quickly I'd picked up his role, and he put the stories in the Sunday People under his own byline. He forgot to pay me for them, and I was destitute and starving, unable to pay my rent on my room or pay for food. I quickly discovered that anyone could write a story. Journalism was about getting people to talk to you. Hurt by my desertion to New York, Phil took his old journalist girlfriend called Tina Weaver back to the Pont du Gard, and he sent me a postcard from France to my bedsit in Brooklyn. "I miss you. I wish it were you. Here, not her." It was over. Yet his world still infatuated me. I wanted to be part of it. I flew back to London and applied for employment as a rookie hack working for the News of the World news desk to the editor Greg Miskiw. Phil Hall had moved to the News of the World, so he was the editor and Greg Miskiw was his underling. Little did he know when he hired me that I was one of the victims who had had their lives ruined. I never wanted to happen to me again. I wanted to find out all of their secrets, to help others like me, tip them off, screw it up for the press who I hated. Phil ignored me as I sat in his newsroom. He was afraid of me. He was afraid I would talk about our love story, he with the devil's daughter dressed in scarlet. To get in with the other reporters, I giggled in corners and I gossiped about him. I lied that he had a really small willy just to make them laugh. I don't know if he hated me or not. at one of the Christmas parties. I saw him standing there staring at me. I looked at him, pretending not to be me, pretending I'd forgotten everything. The music was playing and our eyes met. And I looked away. I wasn't me anymore. I was someone else. I wasn't the girl he knew. I was someone else. And I seemed to be on some kind of mission. This someone else seemed to be taking off like a late freight. It shocked both Phil and me when my dizzying ascent in the newspaper industry materialised overnight. The News of the World had a strong appetite for my style of working. I seemed to know who to speak to and what to say to them to get a story. It wasn't about blagging. Hundreds of investigators who can do silly blagging applied to the papers all the time, and reporters also use this trick of getting stories. Actor John Ford was a brilliant blagger they all used. I had something different, but had nothing to do with the me who Phil had known, but this other me that had appeared when I had read the book Strangers Among Us. I had a weird skill of knowing things that I shouldn't really know. Who to ring, what to say to them to get them to cough up their secrets. And it shocked even me. And I only knew how to do it after I'd gone to sleep on the problem. I would ask my deepest self, or this deeper self, and in sleep that part communicated it back to the outer normal me. Reporters I confided this to sneered at me, but they still used me. It wasn't blagging to stand up every single reporter's stories. No, not blagging. My skill made other journalists envious. The most envious ones were those who termed themselves investigators. One of them was called Graham Johnson, who is now out to help Hollywood crush me and make out I'm a blagger or I'd done something illegal. But back then, Phil Hall watched with incredulity as my earnings rose from a junior hack's 25k to a giddy 100k a year. My accountant was a stickler for being proper, and I still have the proof of this in neat leather-bound books. It's not often working class girls earn the big bucks. I was shocked and I wondered what was going on. How come I could do this? I never was able to do it before. A friend of mine introduced me to a man called Hugh Burnett. He told me he was ex-BBC, but I read in his obituary that Hugh Burnett was actually MI6. He lived quite near to me, and I began to go and see him. On his advice, I began to branch out and work for other newspapers, the Sunday Mirror, the Daily Mail, and the Times. I used this gift, and it seemed to work for me in this world. I became friends with the other journalists, Fiona Whitty, Dave Dillon, Dennis Rice, Matt Bell. Because of my unique skill, newspaper editors like Paul Dacre invited me to champagne parties at the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. People buy top cops and security services men. My skills grew, proving stories by garnering the correct information and proof. They called me Fleet Street's secret weapon, and royal hack Clive Goodman called it the Christine Hart magic. In a way, it was magic. I was proud. Well, at least I had some kind of skill others liked me for. Some reporters hated the rise of this dumb cluck blonde who once snogged a serial killer and hadn't been to journalism school. I felt their eyes watching me. Yeah, sure, I knew old PI tricks, but I didn't as much as turn as an ex-directory phone number. I knew they'd grass me up to their cop contacts, so I kept everything clean. I could smell them hating me. I could just look at a photograph and see a way into a celebrity's private life. After sleeping, I'd wake up and know just who to call and exactly what to say to extract information out of their minds, what to say to them to get them to open up to me. None of it was or is illegal. The editor rewarded me with money and arse licking, which was what my tiny broken ego needed. I reported what they were all up to back to the offshoots. of the spy companies I used to work for. CIX Limited, which was Company X in French, C and then X, a firm owned by ex-MI6 officer Michael Oatley, started to hire me. They were investigating Fleet Street, especially the News of the World's use of the boys at Hereford. I disliked reporting back to my old world, but I somehow felt I had no choice. They were angry, but not at me. I was attending the Priory Clinic in Roehampton for weekly hypnotism to access my childhood. I found I could not access my childhood memories at all. I read that a man using therapy called EMDR, that was a veritable time machine, saw A-list Robbie Williams, Kate Moss, Ruby Wax. I felt honoured to be able to be seen by him. I went along for years, and soon gossip spread, and all my journalist peers knew that I had access to a cast of superstars. Of course, they pressured me to spy, and look, I despise the idea of wandering the corridors of the Priory in my nightdress, a spy for the tabloids, crying about my childhood and envious of powerful, successful people's wealth and status. I thought I deserved fame like they had. I felt a loser, second rate, and I felt afraid of them and angry I wasn't one of them. But I never would have hated them enough to hurt them by spying on them for the gutter press. People asking you to do something is one thing, actually doing it is another. So I hung out with Ruby Wax and Marty Peller and enjoyed the Priory's West Wing and Centre Court and their fare of apple crumble and private parties. But I wondered why I wasn't famous like Catherine Zeta-Jones and Kate Moss, so I was bitter. I had to lie. Whenever I was asked to spy, I had to lie. I had no choice. I'd say, yes, this one is in there, or yes, this one's not. Really angry, they're abusing me by asking me. But I had no intention of letting them take what I loved away from me or get me arrested. No one was going to take my journalistic career off me. I worked hard at putting away pedophiles and exposing villains. Sometimes I played the wife of Mazza Mahmood. I was proud of all I did. The outcast who protected others. Fleet Street who enjoyed ruining lives. I saw myself as a secret good person. Maybe I should just stayed away from them. But what else had I? The devil's daughter. Reporter Graham Johnson found out that I was the devil's daughter. He passed around old copies of the Sunday People to everyone, with me on the cover. Oh my God, Chris is related to Ian Brady. What else is she hiding? What kind of sneaky person is she? And how can she do what she does? I think she's a hacker. She's only a blagger. Fiona Whitty took me out to dinner to find out the details that Graham was talking about, and I felt they were all waiting to hear back what she reported. News of the World editor Alex Maranchek knew the Ian Brady story was a farce and hated Phil Hall. He lost no chance in ribbing me. Oh, Chris, how's your dear father, darling? How is Ian Brady? Daddy, how's Daddy? Ha ha ha. Oh, and how's Phil Hall? So, let me see. He not only made up a load of old shit to ruin your life, he got his leg over too. Oh, remind me, how much did he pay you? Oh, nothing. Oh, he's such a charmer, isn't he? Phil Hall heard about this and punished Alex by sending him away to work in Belfast. I began to feel isolated again, but I was still getting results. My favourite editor, Chris Boffey, left the Sunday Mirror. Tina Weaver, Phil Hall's girlfriend, arrived to take it over. As soon as she did, she kicked me out. I didn't care. I had the Mail, the Times, Alison Boshoff, Rick Hewitt, Chris Boffey, Ian Cobain continued to use me, and I still work for the News of the World, but I preferred the Daily Mail, the Times, and Chris Boffey brought me in at the Telegraph, and I began to work on top investigations. Before Tina kicked me out, I got a Sunday Mirror press pass from Dennis Rice and Matt Bell, and it said Sunday Mirror staff reporter on it. Once I had that, I was able to interview people. I felt valued for the very first time in my life, and it felt good. I went to Daphne's. I met George Harrison. I felt as if I was somebody, not the working class girl who I'd been before, doing jobs where I might have got beaten up. Hello, it's Peter Allen from the Daily Mail. Please may we borrow your genius? Sometimes I felt a fraud because it was an inner separate part of me, standing up stories, doing all the clever stuff. She was different. She was still me. She just felt not like me. I wondered why I hadn't yet become an adult, or others around me were maturing, but I was at a standstill. I felt like a 15-year-old child. It irked me having to depend on a self that seemed not like me. I called this strong side Catherine, and the normal part of me Penny. I seemed to have separate parts. I noticed that about the serial killer Ian Brady. He had parts, and one of his parts was this Nazi doctor. I assumed that maybe adoption caused this part thing, and I decided to make a study of it. I didn't buy a flat with my 6-figure salary. I felt the money was dirty. After all, it was News International, tabloid wages. I was an NG reader, and money was a hook that had attachment, especially if it was from a bad source, and it could then rebound on you. The press ruined lives, so the money had hooks of this karma. I pulled out the hooks by merely wasting it. I bought shoes. Hugh Burnett, the ex-BBC producer, encouraged me to become a war reporter in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I had the idea that I would make a lot of money by writing a book on the real IRA. I got to know a ruthless terrorist leader called Liam Campbell, who lived in Dundalk, a no-go area for the British Army. Greg Miskey from the News of the World encouraged me to use my body to become a better reporter. I followed Greg's advice and appropriated the leader of the real IRA as my lover. I was suddenly ambitious to write a book. He was really easy to seduce. Once inside Dundalk, he invited me to his house. I became his lover. I had access to everything. I touched everything. I walked around inside his home. He trusted me because our sex was bonding and intense. I felt like I was in love with him. I didn't know why. I eventually knew his house, back to front. I knew all his hideaways. He walked around showing me this and that. My journalism on the real IRA became known for its accuracy. I thought about what I was doing. I knew that the British Army got killed if they went to XMG, which is known as Crossmaglen. Soldier Robert Nairek from Ampleforth went there to look around, and he was chopped up. Ampleforth was a bit like my orphanage, a Catholic Jesuit-run place, and Robert Nairek grew up there. His body was fed to the pigs after his spying mission failed. Yet I strolled around Crossmaglen whistling and breakfasted in Dundalk in their cafe opposite the Emerald Bar, their notorious pub. I kind of felt proud. I'd done something Nairek had failed. Somewhere deep inside I felt, am I spying on them? But yet I was a working class girl and nobody asked me. So I felt that feeling was just crazy. I'm just a journalist. I was soon taken out to dinner by all the editors of the broadsheet newspapers in Belfast. About my stories being exact in detail, Rosie Gowan from The Guardian, Henry MacDonald from The Observer, all brought me expensive dinners and begged me to introduce them to my contacts. I decided to take the more honest offer by Liam Clark of the Sunday Times to write for him. Sunday Times editor Liam Clark began to employ me properly and commissioned me to go to press conferences to give me work for the magazine, and I began to hang out with him on jobs such as meeting the UDA's Michael Stone. I'd recently got the Times the front page, where I'd got the name of the man Bignell who was beheaded by ISIS. I was standing up stories when others couldn't. South Armagh Provisional IRA had morphed into the ultra-dangerous and unreachable real IRA, and I began to make TV appearances on the BBC as a crime reporter. The reals were not amenable to the offers of millions from the British government. They had just paid out £7 million to the INLA. I was tipped off by an INLA leader who had introduced me to a man called Dark Cloud, the INLA's newest leader. Paul confirmed their payout by coming to my house and telling me. I wrote it up for the mail and they gave me this sole byline. Thinking I was becoming a defence reporter, I joined the RAF on a voluntary basis as press officer. Dr. Mark Collins helped me handle the stress and told me how well I was doing. He was seeing Britney Spears in America, and when he flew out to his clinic in Hollywood, the Priory had always been my sanctuary, since undergoing Art Janov's primal therapy in Los Angeles, where John Lennon was also a patient. I called the hotshot, strong, seductive side of me Catherine. The name I picked was Catherine Trammell in Basic Instinct. I did that because this part owned my sexuality. I didn't seem to have a sexuality at all, but this clever part of me did have a sexuality. I just didn't know what her objective was, but there seemed to be an objective. Touch seemed to be important. My work was bothering me. I told Dr. Collins, I feel kind of odd because it's like I wake up naked next to the head of the Real IRA in the middle of Dundalk and I feel really scared. It's like I wasn't the person that had gone there. And I know I've gone there, but I kind of wake up and think, what am I doing? And it felt crazy to be there. I'd wake up and feel trapped. It's like the stupid side of me would wake up and I'd look down and see my body and things around and a sleeping enemy of the state lying naked beside me. And I'd know that I'd been with him, but yet I hadn't. And I would feel really scared. And I would remember it, but wonder why I would do something like that. It just wasn't something I would do. What English reporter would? These were highly dangerous men. Getting close to them was one thing, but this was ridiculously close. I was buried away in the Irish countryside in a no-go area, and I'd have to play a role so I could leave, make out I felt sick or something. And I was so terrified he'd chop me up like Robert Narak and feed me to Slab Murphy's snuffling pigs. I would have to pretend that I really liked him and pretend to get out of there. And I would feel so scared until I was safe back at the airport. And yet I would go back again and again. For my trouble, the News of the World called me our girl on my front and middle page spread on the Real IRA. I couldn't work it out why one minute I was enjoying myself to get stories and the next minute I wanted to scream for help. It's like this side of me came and went and I never knew when she'd leave or appear to wake up to her life, and it was my life. It's like she lived on full volume, minus any kind of fear and with an agenda. My career grew via her. Word spread and I was approached for the Observer by a lawyer who turned out to be CIA. He told me he wanted me to get close to ISIS in the UK by recruiting young Muslims to go undercover in mosques. The CIA served me up some books on ISIS and Bin Laden. I was pampered by them and then left alone. I never heard from them again. I knew they'd probably tap my phone and come into contact with my douche side. I knew it was who they wanted. They wanted Catherine. I saw myself as a good journalist, whining and dining, leaking information here and there, a player in a game I had no idea of. I had no idea, but I knew I never clocked off. I afforded rent on an expensive London penthouse, and I was happy for a while. But I noticed it was only me. At weekends, I just longed for work week to begin again. I ate alone, Marks and Spencer's ready meals. I watched TV, I watched films, mostly about people going undercover. And I cried, because I don't think anyone should ever be that alone, yet know so many people. Suddenly, John Boyle appeared back in my life. He saw where I was living. And I felt afraid. Something about seeing John Boyle made my stomach churn. It was almost as if a bell had gone in a kind of dream, and the bell was saying, it's time to wake up now. This isn't your life. It's a dream we've given you, but now we're pulling you out of it. It was all over. Forget your journalist crap. Just give me the details and your contacts. I had no intention of giving him anything. And my adoptive aunt showed her face. She was still a sister in the Vatican of Rome, and she told me that I must let John Boyle inside my Fleet Street world. It'll allow you to concentrate more on book writing. So I found myself introducing John Boyle into Fleet Street. Thus Fleet Street met phone hacking. I had no idea of it, or that John was master of it. I'd never even heard of it. John met up with Greg Miskew through me, and then Greg dumped me. Greg and Phil Hall childishly adored all the illegality John Boyle had to offer, and they dumped me like a hot potato. They'd never liked my hocus pocus. They wanted real data, and that was something that I couldn't get. But I'd whet their appetite, yet they hated it. They had to depend on a flake like me. When I found out everything, I couldn't work out John Boyle. He literally had millions. Property in Aspen, property in Sussex, the trophy wife. Why risk prison for carrying out illegality for stupid people like them? Greg and Phil soon wanted to drop John Boyle because he charged about $6,000 per inquiry. They decided, in typical newspaper hates private eye style, to steal his little office boy called Glyn Mulcair that John had trained to hack and steal and paid very little. So the green office boy Mulcair, who didn't know much about private investigations because he was a footballer, was suckered by Greg Miskew and went to work for the News of the World. Since Boyle had been working for the Sunday Mirror on my coattails, they made Mulcair go under contract to not work for Tina Weaver. John had no idea they'd stolen his little office boy. But they decided when they stole his little office boy to not pay him the $200,000 they owed him, just to tell him to get stuffed. Greg said, "Get lost," playing the hardshore, the petty villain, yet he was so out of his league. John knew MI6, 14 int. He knew everybody that was anybody. So he went to Andy Coulson over Greg Miskew's head. I think you'll pay me, Andy, or you'll find that I'll inform all the politicians and all the celebrities you paid me to hack. Andy Coulson paid up straight away, but John was still bruised and still angry. I wonder who they've got instead, or maybe they're trying to do it themselves. Who knows? But, oh well, I'll write it off. Over lunch with me, Greg Miskew spoke over and over to a man called Glyn non-stop. I knew that this was the way he had once spoken to me, asking me this and that over every problem. So I thought, it's funny, Glyn, and the name went round my head. Later on, I met up with John, and we, of course, ended back at my flat in Shad Thames. We were like, kind of, what is it they call it? Fuck buddies. And so we ended up in bed, and I said, "Hey, you know, after they dropped me for you, I think they dropped you for a man called Glyn." John shot up in bed. "Oh, God, I don't think they quite know who I am." He recognised the name immediately. His office boy, who had just said, "I think I'll leave and go back to playing football." And then Greg had said, "Yeah, we're not going to pay you, John. Get lost," while he grabbed his boy. It was kind of funny. Ex-orphan boy John was not a man to cross. I even suspected he had his enemies murdered. He hung out and worked with 14th Int and MI6 and top cops who ruled the UK. I don't suppose it was hard for him to destroy the News of the World, but it was fast in coming. Greg was lucky. In revenge, John grassed them all up to the cops. The News of the World closed down. Greg and Glyn went to prison, and Greg got the shit beaten out of him in his cell, which I suspected was John's personal touch. No one mentioned John Boyle and the worldwide expose of the phone hacking, not even the man who called me York in his book, Nick Davies. John was a ghost, another man was shit scared. James Hanning from the Independent on Sunday has written the book The News Machine, said to me, Chris, I can't write about John Boyle. No one can. He's rich as Croesus. He'll destroy us all. Safe in his £8 million mansion in Sussex, where the boys of Operation Wheating couldn't even get inside his gates, and hacked off. Don't seem to give a shit about him. George Clooney paid the Guardian's investigative top man Nick Davis so much money that he retired. Yet the movie was never made. Davis just got his payoff to keep quiet. The MI6 were the ones who brought in phone hacking. Phone hacking wasn't a victory for the public. It was a setup, so the papers no longer did any exposés on human trafficking and paedophiles. The UK was rife with vampiric pedos in high places, but no one ever got nicked for it. Newspapers shit themselves after the phone hacking scandal that they might end up beaten up in a cell like Greg Miskew. So the state now had full control of mainstream media, and it was all PR stories. Sometimes they would stamp investigates on a story, but that was just a mockery. Hungry young bucks entering Fleet Street from university who would sometimes get experience working as investigators and then become feisty young independent journalists, or feisty editors bucking the system, or go off freelancing like John Pilger around the world, kicking down closed doors, would now no longer get any training. Old-style investigations and exposés died with the phone hacking scandal. A darkness had risen. No more Clark Kent Superman to save ailing Gotham City. Gotham City had just endured a human meat pie thrown at it in a wave of millions of immigrants. To them, it seemed like a victory. The press been spanked. Yeah, we've won. Phone hacking, we've got them, the dirty little phone hackers. Ha ha ha. No one was spanked. Well, perhaps Rupert Murdoch was spanked by his lovely new wife, Jerry Hall, in the privacy of their little bedroom. Jerry was his reward for taking the hit of a small discomfort of renaming the News of the World after John supposedly burned it down. No, at the top they all know each other. It hadn't died. It was just renamed The Sun on Sunday. The Kit Kat machine was still in the same part of the room it had been when it was the News of the World newsroom. Nothing was closed. But now it didn't carry out any kind of investigations, nor did any of mainstream media. Occasionally it stamped the term investigations on a story, but it was all propaganda for the elite. No longer a journalist, I went off and gave birth to a child. I called him Arthur Charles. I soon discovered that being an ex-Fleet Street journalist meant nothing whatsoever to the rich stay-at-home wives in London's suburbia. My son was totally left out by the rich Stepford wives in the village because I was a single career woman. The wives of the vampires loved their free mansions and their gifted 4x4s and their coffee mornings. They were lazy, they were evil, and they hated children. Their own were farmed out on non-stop playdates, and if you were not part of the hive, your kids would get hurt by them. We lived in rented accommodation and I was unemployed, so my child was lined up to get the shit kicked out of him by the women. All the parties, all the treats and trips run by the mothers, they made sure my little boy was left out. And that was 4, 5 years old, 6 years old. My little boy howled as he watched the other kids in the class go snaking hand in hand off to a balloon party he was intentionally left out of. Pain made my son kinder-hearted. He vowed when he grew up to build free housing for mothers and kids who didn't have men to support them. He vowed that in the community housing he would have amazing parties and no one would be left out of those parties. Not black, not white, nor rich, nor poor, nor married or unmarried. Because I know how much it hurts, Mummy, he told me. I was smeared with a phone hacking, even though I had no idea even how to do it, or that John Ball was likely to do such a thing. So I was unemployable, and I couldn't support my son. That really hurt me. I couldn't go back to spying because I knew I was a journalist who would report. They knew I was a journalist who would report back on any illegalities they were up to at the agencies. So there I was, a busy applying for jobs at store checkouts at Tesco and not getting them because the EU immigrants were getting them and they were younger. I was absolutely terrified. I became scared, depressed, and feared my son would suffer because I was an arsehole. I tried to find work. While I was looking, I appeared on GMTV to talk about bullying in schools. I was still doing various appearances on BBC Channel 4 to talk about Ian Brady, plus the BBC World Service. But it was all for free, and it didn't help paying the rent or feeding us. None of it paid anything, so I was starving in a garret when I finally published a book through Hodder and Stoughton. Searching for Daddy inspired people, so they said. Reading it was like having a good friend. It made me proud I'd helped others who had been sexually abused or violently abused in childhood. It was listed as Sunday Times bestseller, and it got to 15 in the charts and number 3 in the W.H. Smith charts. I felt proud I'd achieved something. Peter Allen, meanwhile, recommended me to The Sun, and I worked for them for a while. They became curious about the Priory, and I hated that. I fobbed them off by regurgitating info they'd told me. I needed to support myself, and writing advances were not lucrative unless you were Joan Collins. I enjoyed the good stuff from The Sun and worked for them as a reporter, assisting people like Andy Parry, Chris Ferrer and Guy Patrick. In 2009, one of their reporters, I won't name him, did a bad scam on Heather Mills, then threw me a dummy phone to lie to her. It was a really crass nonsense investigation that had nothing to do with me. Heather screamed at me for half an hour how she was treated like Yoko. I tried to calm Heather down. I'd always admired her for her work on exposing the health risks of cow's milk. Fleet Street men hated her because of her strength and delighted in trying to degrade her. Nick referred to her as the slut. I was sacked out of the blue over Nick's complete bullshit investigation after 6.5 years of helping The Sun get front pages. The Daily Mail let go of me at the same time because Nick said that I actually was a private investigator rather than a reporter, and they were no longer touched by Fleet Street. John Boyle, scared of me talking out about him, introduced me to one of his very rich ex-MI6 chums, and I got work spying on nuclear plants for KCS Limited, the ex-MI6 firm I started to work for in Knightsbridge. Yet every task seemed to hold a risk of me being murdered. They told me the risk was there up front, but in the end I had to refuse because I had my son to keep alive for. I waited patiently for Jay. I believed everything that psychic had told me because everything it had said come true. I had no savings, so I began to feel the skids underneath us. I couldn't sleep. I was so afraid of life in poverty. We'd no home that we owned. I was middle-aged. I feared most for my beautiful little boy, Arthur, who was my whole life. Trees shed their leaves in a flurry of autumn 2012 as I sat mid-publication tour on my second book. I'd worked really hard for over 5 years, writing non-stop, and it was published by Transworld. I sat in a quaint little English bookshop in London on a book signing for fans of a book called In for the Kill. I'd worked for 3 years researching the book, which was called A True Story of Hunting Evil. I'd researched the book with cops and serial killers, and I was absolutely drained. I was bringing up a child alone, I was no income, and I was working 10-hour days, and it wasn't a great mix. Transworld hasn't given me any advance, so I was hoping the second published book would sell. Meanwhile, Hollywood, via Jane Campion's sister Anna Campion, told me she wanted to direct a movie of my life, and later on another producer came along that hit the Sunday Mirror. With Sienna Miller set to play me, a story appeared in the Sunday Mirror about Sienna Miller playing me. The story sat online mocking me. In the end, there was no movie because Miramax told Anna Campion that my abuse was too depressing. I felt that all my work was for nothing. The book wasn't selling because nobody knew it was out there. I was broke, and I felt I'd worked for the last 5 years for nothing. I'd also spent all our savings as I was writing. The gamble hadn't paid off, so I really hated myself. For the first time, I thought about self-harming, but I didn't do it. But the hate for myself was absolutely palpable. I saw how other women had done it right. Got husbands, made sure their kids were in secure houses, but I'd screwed up. Hadn't picked a man who'd stood by us. He'd found another he'd fallen in love with. He wasn't my Jay. My attempt to get us a house for my writing had failed. I really cursed myself for failing my son. I told myself, you're a fuck up. You can't do anything right. You're an arsehole. I tried to do book signings to push the book myself. It seemed futile. I felt really tired. It was fruitless. The shops were always empty. One day, as I sat doing a book signing in London, I looked up and noticed there was a dark-haired stranger in the London Waterstones where I was signing copies of my new book. She shoved a copy of my book under my nose. I felt like anxious, but I picked up my pen to sign it. What's your name? I was surprised by her accent, New York American. Secondly, by what she said. Hey, I'm here to tell you that life isn't a journalist story. You're a mind control monarch slave. What? What? Pardon, what? You're a secret weapon. I'm not a secret weapon, she went on, seemingly ignoring me. I flew miles across an ocean to tell you this. You don't know, do you? I put down my pen. I felt she was crazy and I was an open target just sitting there. You're a meticulously produced, costly asset, the Roman Catholic Church. The you sitting here in front of me is merely a front for Alice. Alice is inside you. She's an alter personality. She can only be triggered by your owners. Alice is psychically gifted, like its dark side, dark occult. They run you to get close to enemies of theirs. You touch, you bring it back. Intimate touch is the conduit. Take information from one body, feed it back to another body. Downloading, uploading. But it's not you, it's her, Alice. Can't you feel her? Pardon me? What? Pardon? I signed my book for her, but I felt she was a complete nutbag. You don't believe me. You do know the Priory is a programming center? You go there? It's where they send Hollywood mind control slaves for the top-up programming. It's the sister of the Tavistock where Dr. Green works. Couldn't believe when I read your book about all you done, and you don't even know you're a monarch slave. What? Dr. Green? It's Dr. Collins who runs the Priory, and many others in the USA. Hang on, you flew here from America to London to tell me this bollocks? I handed her back my book with my signature. Human trafficking, not madness. You know about sex trafficking? Human trafficking? Seen the film Trafficking? Seen it with, who's it got in it? Hey, yes, I flew here. Why? Because it happened to me. I know that once I told you, you'd shout it from the rooftop. So I flew here even though I have varicose veins and I'm 82 years old. She was very confident she had to be mad. She kept on. She sat down and she carried on telling me crazy stuff that Brian Harvey would think was really mad. But you know what, Brian? I didn't believe it either. Hey, I know you think I'm crazy, but I've read your book. I've seen the invisible puppet strings. Alice can get out of a place and download information back to other men, skin to skin. Ever seen the movie Long Kiss Goodnight? Well, they're telling the story of Monarch Mind Control slaves. You pick it up, you drop it back. Only trouble is, you keep swapping in when she's there. Screwing it up for her because you're scared shitless. The nasty creeps you're spying on. And who wouldn't be? They're the most dangerous men on the planet. Hell, they want you to spy on ISIS. They don't care if you end up headed. You're getting old. Soon you won't be able to do it. And then you'll be no use to them. Like now. You're no use to them now. That's why you're on the scrap heap. You got nothing. They always end up bankrupt with nothing. It's called the freedom train and you've been tossed by it, baby. Oh, I felt dizzy yet I wanted to laugh. What? A toss by? I'm not has-been. What a bitch. She raised her voice above the din of the shop. The best spy an English can make is a spy who doesn't know she's a spy. They also harvested your heart, so you can't love, can you? They broke your trust in the orphanage. With torture, violence, sexual abuse. Hell, you children, unrestricted lab rats to experiment on. Kids no one wants in Catholic orphanages. Free guinea pigs. Nobody girls that nobody wants to be trafficked. I would know if this were true. I'd know it. I thought of Bishop Philip Harvey, who was a father to me in the kids' home. He'd received an OBE. Why is a bishop receiving bloody OBE? All of a sudden I started to feel really sick. The American grinned at me. Alice earned you your rich flat and your fancy car you talked about in this book. Come on, you've written it all here. You said you didn't even have a college education. How could you possibly work on Fleet Street? £100 a year you earn. It's not your skills you're using. You're a monarch. They help you. You have psychic skills. They attach demons to one of your altars. That was it. That was too much for me. Attaching demons to one of my altars? She must have been completely barkingly mad. I didn't want anything to do with this madness. I looked up at her. Well, actually, I did sense something had gone on in that orphanage. I mean, I was never really adopted. My adopted parents brought me back twice a year. That's weird, isn't it? Anna burst out. You're their slave. You're human trafficked, branded like livestock. Sex slave. I'm sorry, but I don't believe any of this. She shook her head. Male children used for wet work and CIA cleanup. Serial killers, all programmed experiments. Fine choosing unwanted kids long-term in hospitals and bostels. Kids like us for spies or to carry out mute work. The beautiful ones, they're called presidential models. Used for passed around. She collapsed herself down next to me, and seeing her face close up, I could see she had once been a really, really beautiful American girl. She spoke softly. All you have to know right now is that your front altar, you now, looking at me, doesn't know about Alice. I bit my lip. Whenever she spoke about Alice, I started to feel a sense of fear, almost like a sense of foreboding. It was like she was talking about Catherine, who I had called Catherine. She carried on talking to me, but I was barely listening. She said things like, you see life through a dark lens, so you give way to her when she comes knocking. Black magic, ritualistic violence, that seals the program into place. Your mother was your witch handler, part of the cult, the Roman Catholic Church. The rituals they used to create mind control slaves called moonshot. Moonshot created by Aleister Crowley. When your masters trigger you to click your red shoes, you morph into her. Alice feels powerful. She's powerful and psychically gifted. Then you chase the White Rabbit. He appears in your dreams. White Rabbit's your handler who controls you on missions. Slaves of the Vatican. What? White Rabbit comes to you in dreams and suggests what you do. Then you act out his commands in real life. I don't have desires. I have no desire. My book on Island had never been written. There was no book. All my ideas just seemed to fade when, after I'd done all the work getting close to these people, I stared at her, but all this sounds mad. She ignored me. Oh, it's very clever. Security service are about 50 years ahead of us, mere mortals. I stood up. I'd heard enough. I felt just like Brian Harvey. I wanted to dismiss anybody that talked about Monarch Mind Control as a crank. I didn't want to be locked up. I certainly didn't want to be out there talking about it. Suddenly I recalled a really hot day in the summer in Belfast. I remembered being in the Gortin Glen, lying with the real IRA leader in the wilds of this glen in Ireland. We sunbathed by a river, and it was a really hot day, and we both took our tops off. All of a sudden, after laying there, I suddenly stood up and began to shake and cry. He lost his temper and shouted, "You're like two different people. I'm going sick to death of this shit. One's scared and crazy. Look at you now, sobbing and shaking. It's like you don't even fucking know me. The other one, oh, she's exciting, sexy devil may care. She's a wildcat in my bed and I'm in love with her. But you nutter. Do you want to go home now, I suppose? I want to go home. I'm scared. I don't know where I am. I'm scared. I'll drive you home. I'm sick of this, though. Suddenly I knew he meant Catherine. I'd called her Catherine. I'd called her that because of her power. She held men in the palm of her hand. Her sex was wild, insatiable, like she wanted to eat them or something, and that's why they liked her. I just assumed that Catherine was a strong part of me, yet it wasn't an aspect of me. It was like someone else entirely. It was Catherine who had done all the impressive work for the newspapers. I was Penny, the arsehole. Catherine was Alice. It was like having on and off amnesia, waking up to someone else's life, and yet it was your own life, and yet it wasn't amnesia because I remembered everything. It was a terribly dangerous life. This stranger knew all about it. She kept talking about Catherine, yet calling her Alice. I saw it so clearly. Catherine was Alice. I had a problem, maybe. Maybe it was all bullshit. I was so bloody confused. Maybe listening to Anna was my fatal mistake of slipping down the rabbit hole. I searched online like a hypochondriac, thinking they had cancer when they didn't. I googled Monarch Mind Control. The writers, mostly American, believe that the deep state created puppets, monsters who shot up schools and committed serial murder for experiments to repeal gun laws. The girls, like Kathy O'Brien, were used as spies or agent provocateurs and had genie in a bottle style ultra-sexualized personalities. They believe that these projects used girls in sexual human trafficking to pick up information and download it back to the deep state. Shattered, traumatized girls and boys from care homes, vulnerable minds honeycombed and then hypnotized with themes of occult books containing triggers. They used kids who were in long-term hospitals or children's homes, unwanted kids to experiment on and use. I was horrified by this Alice in Wonderland macabre, especially as one of my favourite books. If I was under control by something outside of myself, then they could jerk me at any moment. I was relieved to hear a man called JamesCasbolt, who made YouTube videos about life in a Catholic orphanage in Canada and calling us super soldiers, saying that the program broke down at age 40 and then the victim would usually end up poor because they had been used to living in a certain way and now couldn't cope when trying to look after themselves and getting work for themselves. It all ran horribly true for my life. Feeling scared, I talked to Mark Collins back at the Priory. I told him all about Anna and how I was researching this mind control and how my mixed up life of psychic urges finally made sense to me. Yet Dr. Mark Collins was confident it was nonsense. Do you feel that this Monarch program will absolve you of all your failures? Failures of no good marriage and no real friends, Christine. You've nothing wrong with you, I keep telling you. You've just got low self-esteem. Now you found this out, you hope it means that there's something wrong with you, but there's not. Your son was left out in that village because you weren't married. That's the end of it all. Just find a man. Find a man and join in with the other women. Enjoy your body. Try to enjoy sex for once. Why are you like this? I swallowed hard. I was waiting. I'm saving myself for Jay. Oh, come on. That's absolutely ridiculous because a psychic told you about Jay. What a load of nonsense. Now go out, join Match.com and try and find a man. I went down the stairs from his office, feeling sick and sad. So it was true. I was just a dumb failure and a struggling single mother fuck-up. The stuff about Alice had made so much sense, but it was just a loser's way of coping with the fact they'd lost in life. I was in poverty, I was a loser, and it was all my own doing, not someone else's. I wasn't a puppet, I was just an idiot. I was so grateful for my beautiful child, yet so filled with self-hatred that I hadn't provided a stable home, just rentals. I vowed to forget this bullshit nonsense and work on earning money to get my son a permanent home and holidays like other children. We hadn't afforded one in years. I joined Match.com, yet my heart wasn't in it. I felt deep down that if I did have a man, I would want a man who would clean out my heart and bring me out of my numbness I existed inside, end my loneliness with just one kiss, make the mess of my life just perfect in 1 second. And a man like that just really didn't exist. It was 2012 and a balmy August evening. I just put my son to bed and read to him. Back downstairs, I poured a gin and tonic and added some lemon. I sat on my settee surfing the TV. I flicked through the films, but there was nothing good. I flicked and flicked all through the TV channels. There were so many of them these days, but all of them were nonsense and rubbish. I came across a documentary about a very famous American serial killer called the Hillside Strangler. I went to flick past. I'd certainly had enough of bloody serial killers, but something about his voice made me stop. I heard something familiar in it as he boasted about his vile murders. He was called Kenneth Bianchi, and he was the notorious Hillside Strangler. They said that he had an alter personality called Steve, and it was Steve who killed and strangled the 13 women. I turned up the TV in spite of myself. Kenneth Bianchi confessed to having the killing alter Steve who murdered 13 girls. My ears pricked up. Here was this alter thing again. Strangler Kenneth Bianchi grew up in a Roman Catholic children's home and then went on to join the Vatican in a priest seminary. I turned up the TV. Bianchi stood belligerently boasting, but not as blue-eyed Ken. This time he was inky-eyed Steve, his wicked killing alter. I killed that one. Yeah, this one Angela killed. I did this broad. This one, I don't know. This one he killed. This one, I don't know. This one he did. This one I did. I don't know that bitch. That one I did. Angie killed that one. Yep, I did that one. They did this broad. I heard something familiar in his obscene boasting about torturing and murdering. I heard the same energy patterning in his voice as the Nazi doctor personality I'd heard in Brady. I felt I was listening to this same entity. It filled me with a kind of horror. What the hell is it? Didn't actually feel as if it was human. I wrote to Bianchi straight away and he replied almost immediately, despite Hugh Burnett telling me that he would never reply to anybody's letters. After exchanging 2 letters with Kenneth Bianchi from his prison in America, I managed to get a commission from Merope Mills at The Guardian to go jump on a plane to interview him. Bianchi had sent me dates where I could visit him. One of them was February the 14th, and that was the only day when there were 2 days in a row that I could go out there and interview him. Merope Mills wanted to call the piece Valentine's Day with the Hillside Strangler, and she gave me $2,000 up front for the first half of the story. I should have sent setup all along, but I didn't. Despite me being commissioned by Merope, she ended up by putting my piece in Reader's Experience, leaving out the fact I went to see Bianchi as a journalist, and she had sent me, calling it Woman Befriends Serial Killer. Yeah, she needed to smear me and make herself look better by making me look bad. But going back to the story and ignoring that side of it, I flew thousands of miles into the mountainside prison of Walla Walla in USA to look into the eyes of Hillside Strangler Kenneth Alessio Bianchi in the Indian town Walla Walla in the mountains near Seattle. I sat with serial killer number 2, a man who had murdered 13 women. I tried not to feel afraid as I watched his pale blue eyes of Ken morph into the black inky eyes of Steve. It seemed like the ink was pooling into them as he switched alter personalities. The blue-eyed Ken was just an average man, but the inky-eyed one, who liked to inject girls with bleach, gas them and experiment on them with torture, scared me absolutely shitless. I could almost feel this Nazi doctor inside of him, just as I had felt it inside Ian Brady. I almost felt as he was going to leap up and stick a needle in my cheek to administer electric shock. After 16 hours and 2 days spent in his company, I stood up to leave for the last time. I realised suddenly with horror that he was going to kiss me. He leaned forward and slobbered into my mouth. "Oh, I like you, Chris," he whispered, drawing back. "But let's see how it goes with us, yeah?" What? I don't like you like that." My head became lighter and something lurched forward, forcing herself against him. It's almost as if a part of me was hungry for his inky-eyed self. She pushed and pulled at his shirt. Suddenly, his inky black eyes returned to pale baby blue. I felt repelled and suddenly pulled back. He pulled back off me. He had switched back to this blue-eyed, and he was curious about me. "Hang on, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing in here with me? Don't you like nice things, Chris? Don't you feel you deserve nice things? And yet you're in here in prison with a dirtbag like me." Blue-eyed Ken leaned forward and suddenly put his mouth to my forehead. Then he looked intensely into my eyes. "What is the matter with you? Are you some sick little bitch? What's going on with you? Why are you here in a prison?" I knew he knew about parts, about alters, about not knowing who the hell you were or why you did the things that you did and ended up in prison or in the bed of a dangerous stranger. A black-eyed girl inside me twisted in his searchlight. He spoke softly. "I see you in there. Why don't you come out? I'm going to call her Minerva. Let her be birthed by me." He held me tight and whispered. As he did, I felt ice thaw, and as it cracked, it hurt so much, because as it cracked, it brought a flood of the most horrific memories. I saw an altar and a priest lifting a chalice up on the Holy Communion. He was wearing a hood, and then he turned. But as he turned, it wasn't a human face. It was the face of a lizard with a long tongue. Deep black oil like pain flooded me. Catherine, so hard, so fucked up, so lonely. She was trapped inside this prison of ice that was cracking all around her, born of lashes with a stick, created by the breath of a demon in the hidden parts of the Roman Catholic Church. His kiss cracked the prison open as the light of reality burned and burned. Outside the prison, I slumped in the hide car and I sobbed and I sobbed, and I saw how twisted my life was, how lost I was in a kind of walking dream. This conjurer's cave of my life was not my life. And for the very first time, I got down on my knees and I prayed. I prayed and prayed to a man that they had beaten to death. I called on Jesus. When I got back to the UK, hacked off paid for my new home in return for helping me destroy the press I'd worked for. They brought me this isolated house on the shady Thames riverside, and I brought a variety of rescue birds to give them the best life I could. I found out I adored animals. At Christmas 2017, a year after I ceased all communication with Kenneth Bianchi and after I'd published In for the Kill, Kenneth Bianchi, the hillside strangler, sent me a photograph of himself sitting in his cell. He had his head shaved and a moustache. It had inky eyes. It was his killing altar. I was tired that day and I fell asleep holding it. In my dream, I dreamt I was in Germany and I was with my twin brother, a 12-year-old brother, Jack, whom I absolutely adored. An evil Nazi doctor kept us imprisoned, even though we were just children. He experimented on us with needles, injecting bleach and gassing us. So much daily infliction of torture. We both ran off in the snow. Eventually we died in the freezing ice rather than go back and face our lives. We walked into the light and then we became separated. I shouted back to Jack that I would search through time to find him and I would never give up. I woke up and I sat up in bed and I put the light on. I looked straight into the inky eyes of the man in the picture and I don't know how I knew. Kenneth Bianchi was Jack, who had once been my twin in a previous life. Jack, who I'd searched for inside this life, yet not known it. He had been split into parts in the programs, and now the real part of them had been programmed. I was lucky that Bianchi had affected me so much when I visited him. Yes, Jack had bashed down my walls and pulled out the real me. Jack had kissed me awake out of my living nightmare. Jack had broken the evil spell over me. And I'd been waiting for Jay. If one believes that more things happen in heaven and earth than mere man is aware of, then one could believe that this dirty, demonic man in cell 3 for the rest of his life had somehow healed me, and that he was Jay that the psychic had told me about. Some Christians online met up with me on a special day in August 2017. 2017. They baptized me in the freezing cold sea in Brighton. I plunged right under the sea. With the salty taste of seawater in my mouth, I received the open heart of Jesus. I cried so much, my salt tears mixing with the salt of the tea. They say that when Jesus comes into a cold heart, he breaks down all the splits. He reclaims his own, and he calls his lost children back home. I knew I had a platform, my writing and my radio show. I wanted to give something to humanity. I wanted to serve others. And I wanted to expose the Vatican and those that ruled this earth for what they were. A guest on my radio show was expert on Monarch programs, Fritz Springmeier. He was author of a book of the controllers of this world, exposing the bankers, exposing the bloodline families. It was called Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Fritz and I became good friends. He told me that the leading Nazi, Dr. Joseph Mengele, known as the Doc to Death, masterminded human trafficking of the Monarch Control program. Yes, Brian Harvey, it's not cuckoo, it's for real. And many, many people believe it, not just a few women on YouTube, babes. He had specialized in MK Ultra, using blonde-eyed Aryan twins to try and create a master race. He had also overseen Liebesborn, manufacturing blue-eyed blondes in orphanages because they were the best ones to carry out MK Ultra on. I thought of my orphanage. The girl and man they threw up as my parents had dark colouring, yet my colouring was Aryan. I knew I would never meet my real father. Joseph Mengele died in 1979. Dr. Mengele was daddy of the programs. He had, according to expert Fritz Springmeier, pushed his own essence inside the mind control program to make himself immortal. The Nazis had been experimenting and made contact, some say, of the tall whites, others greys or reptilians, or others ET or demonic entities. The Nazis' vicious occult experiments had been second to none. Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons had opened portals and let a lot of them have further access to the DNA of humanity. The occultist Nazis who wanted to be immortal were taken by the CIA in Project Paperclip and given a high place inside positions in America. Some believe Dr. Mengele now called himself Dr. Green. I had heard him inside Strangler Kenneth Bianchi whilst he butchered about torturing girls. I had seen him hiding just inside Ian Brady's vacant eyes. I'd smelt his handiwork in the horrific aftermath of the Omar bomb. Victims came forward for me to interview. Fritz said I was the same as Candy Jones, the CIA doll asset spy exposed in the 70s. It was exciting for a while, but there were lots of people claiming it had been done to them. And often it hadn't been. Some even stole my own story. We remained in poverty. It felt like a freak show, so I decided to just plain shut up about it. After all, Anna had warned me to do just that. You can't attack the infrastructure, but if you want to be killed, just shout it from the rooftops and you'll die, or they'll put you in prison. Reader, I didn't know whether it was true or not. How could I know for sure? But I felt my first duty was to protect my son. So I shut down all mention of things like that. My radio shows were about unusual things, but I didn't much talk about myself. As I started to do shows about different things, about other people that had suffered, leaving behind woo-woo stuff, I began to notice something sinister. It was too late. I'd rattled too many cages. A famous professor who lectured in journalism called Professor Brian Cathcart was announcing online I was a data thief and should be locked up. Brian is on the left picture here with comedian Steve Coogan and Nick Clegg MP. Graham Johnson began to ring me and throw money at me and take me out on dates to a cosy French restaurant in Kew with MP Evan Harris. Evan warned me over the lemon tart that my life would become very stressful if I didn't cooperate to help Lily Allen and all the other victims like Sir Elton John. I tried to read Evan, but he seemed cloaked. I'd been approached by a film company and I was wide for sound during those dinners. Graham got the BBC involved and a reporter from Panorama came to meet me. It was the BBC who then, through Graham, paid for me to go to Rendlesham. It was an all-expensive paid break for me and Arthur at Seckford Hall. I was enjoying the attention despite having really bad nightmares about grey aliens carrying out dental work in my mouth after abducting me. I did a radio show from there with Miles Johnson. Graham, fresh out of prison, was throwing me Max Mosley and Hugh Grant's money. He promised me Hollywood would take my story of what happened to me as a monarch slave at the hands of the Vatican and expose this human trafficking. Graham told me Hugh Grant had spoken to Charlize Theron, who read my book and wanted to play me. Why did I listen? And yet at the time I was hanging out with Anne Hardy, Tom Hardy's mother, and Tom Hardy was close to Charlize. So Anne told me she loved my book, In for the Kill, and had passed it to Tom. So it felt like everything was going full circle. Yet, if you've decided to fight for the good side, you'll mostly encounter poverty and good things won't happen. Just bad things will happen. They fly for ones that are part of the hive. If you aren't part, you have to take up your cross and be prepared for bad times to hit. What had Jesus come here to teach us? What did he say he was? He said, I am the gate out of this. We're not here to become part of it. We're here to find our way out. I moved to a house that Hugh Grant had paid for. Our new home was lush. It had wood ceilings and a fan and even a name, the Boathouse. We had a boat parked out in the river for our use. My son and I feared the isolation a bit. There was no one for miles and miles, but there were swans, and Arthur sat each day and fed them. We both felt taken care of, but it was a fool's paradise. These type of men don't take care of women and children. They marry their own kind, and their own kind just treat them as cash cows, and they accept this because they can't love either. I was scared. It was such a dark part of the countryside and we had no neighbours, yet they had been so nice to us. We felt safe. Arthur loved it because it was a long way to school and he felt excited about the boat and the animals. It's only at night times that darkness fell and it scared us both. We bought birds and watched the red kites who would swoop in the trees opposite. The remote country house was the best home we'd ever had. I was so grateful for Graham Johnson, Hugh Grant and Max Mosley for saving us from the streets and from unemployment. 3 weeks after we moved in, we were leaving for the school run at 6:30 and I couldn't shut the front door. A manhole in the garden had been moved, so I slipped down it and scratched all my legs so it was bloody. It was a distraction. The door wouldn't shut properly. Later that night, I searched for my laptop. It was gone. I looked and I found my other computers all missing. One computer belonged to my ex and it was gone. All my cameras were missing. Graham told me to buy a new laptop with money he gave me and that had gone too. A MacBook Pro. I dialed 999. The CID showed me how the thieves have got in. The door had been professionally broken into. They took a few bits of gold. They took none of my few bits of gold from my days of working, even though they were laid out right near the cameras. They could have just picked them up. All they wanted was the computers and cameras. I rang Graham Johnson, who joked, "Hey, look at you and your son were beat up. Just think about that. Move on. It was only scallies. Just move on. Move on. I move on. You're just one of those mad people who think you're targeted, aren't you? Now you think you've been burgled like those targeted nuts you see on YouTube." The police have just been here and they've dusted for fingerprints and every bit of computerware in the house is missing. It's not thinking you're targeted when things have been stolen and the house lock on the house has been jimmied. My little boy couldn't sleep that night. He was so shit scared of Graham bursting into his bedroom at midnight. I slept with a weapon under my pillow, and I was prepared to fight if they came in again. I knew money could pay for men to do this and that, as they even warned me. Brian Harvey, formerly of E17, had dealings with Hattoff and wasn't happy. He came on my radio show telling how he was targeted by Greg Miskew. I had already been threatened that I would have kilos of cocaine planted on me by bent cops and arrested if I didn't go along with them. I was living in fear of them, as was my son. I'd come across an influential hive, and the Hollywood bees were out in full force. Sir Elton, John, Liz Hurley, Heather Mills and others like Lillian were queuing up to say I'd accessed their private data at the Priory, even though the owner said it was impossible. Jerry Hallowell said I spied on her as she had her baby Bluebell in the Portland. Sorry, Jerry, but that's impossible. Graham Johnson boasted to me, you were the Daily Mail's sole investigator for decades. Probable cause. On times when celebrities were spied on, it must have been you. So they're going to prosecute you. Even if you didn't do it, they can come for you and finish you off. You've got no money, but they can put a charge by your name, so you'll be forever in debt to them, forever known as a thief. Unless you help me destroy Paul Dacre of the Daily Mail. I'd record him saying this to me in a French restaurant. According to them, I spied on the great and the golden. I'd be lucky if I got a job waiting tables. So, what is going on? I ask again, who are the bloodsuckers of the planet? They have long taken over the media, banking, education, Hollywood, and all seek to keep us enclosed like animals on a farm and feed off of us. We are mere sheep, herded this way and that. Lead a quiet life and you can have your white picket fence. But you are just a slave. Culture bombing us now with millions of others of differing cultures, so our pure bloodlines are wiped out. Their pure bloodlines are wiped out too. Forced to leave their countries, served up PTSD where the elite have gone in and created wars. This is the New World Order agenda. None of us should have countries that are homes. That would make us strong, less animal. They want us animal. It's easier to herd, to control. They need to make a lower frequency of pain here to make it cold enough for Satan to be birthed in physical form, and then launch an attack for full power on the Creator God. Not their Father, ours. We are at war. Thank you for listening.